There we go. So there it is, the Hope Diamond. Out of its setting, the diamond was found in India in the middle 1600s. It was sold by a gem merchant named Tavernier.
Through the centuries of human history, there have been some pretty crazy paranormal events that have taken place. Those paranormal events were actually something that we covered on this channel recently. But what about things? What about objects? What about stuff whose connection to death is far too strong to ignore? Number 5 on this list is the Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond is one of the most famous jewels in the history of the world. Its exceptional size and beauty are practically unparalleled. It is 45.52 carats and gives off a beautiful blue hue when it is hit by the light, truly a marvel from the world. This diamond is said to be worth anywhere from 200 to 350 million American dollars. To put that in perspective, if you had this diamond, you could buy your own Hawaiian private island in exchange for it. The earliest records of the diamond go all the way back to 1666 when a French gem merchant purchased it. Since then, it has changed hands many times, ending up in the hands of some royalty and eventually making its way to the National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., where it resides today. This diamond may be the most beautiful stone on the entire planet, but one should be careful with it because it's said to hold a curse. Over the years that this diamond has been in circulation, many tragedies have befallen the owners of this stone. An article written by Christy Puchko writes, "Some believe it is cursed, with a whole mythology claiming that great misfortune and misery will befall any who dares to wear the 45.52 carat diamond. Rumored victims of the diamond have suffered disgrace, divorce, suicide, imprisonment, torture, financial ruin, lynching, or decapitation. One was even said to have been ripped apart by dogs and another by a French mob. If these stories are true, then it's no wonder why the legend of a curse has circulated around this diamond. So with all that being said, I want to ask you guys, if somebody offered you this diamond, do you take the risk? On one hand, you could be the owner and the bearer of potentially the most sought after rock on the planet, but on the other hand, you might just be a very expensive dog treat. Let me know what you got down below, diamond or no diamond? Number 4 on this list is Tut's tomb. Now this tomb is the most famous, however this entry could be generalized to any tomb of a pharaoh that is disturbed. If a pharaoh's tomb is disturbed, then you will have activated the pharaoh's curse, and this will befall anyone who enters and disturbs the sleep of these mummified Egyptian royalty. For a long time, hieroglyphs couldn't be deciphered, but in the early 19th century this changed and we were able to read them. On the pyramids of Giza, there is a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and the snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in the water and the scorpion on land." This acts as a pretty clear-cut warning to stay away and not disturb anyone that's inside. I should also note that this rule applies to anyone. We're talking archaeologists, thieves, literally anyone who enters. Your motives for entering don't matter, it's only that you are there. Over the years, this curse has reared its ugly head time and time again. When they first opened the tomb of King Tut, there is a famous story of how Howard Carter, the leader of the team operating the excavation, had a canary, and when it entered the tomb, died at the hands of a cobra. 2 weeks later, the person who financed the whole operation, Lord Carnarvon, was bit by a mosquito and died due to a horrible infection. These are two of the most famous examples, but for centuries, bad luck, sudden illness, and death have been tied to these ancient tombs. Another one of the pharaoh's tombs warns, "They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by a disease that no doctor can diagnose." I'd say that that's just about as clear-cut as curses come these days. Number 3 on this list is James Dean's Little Bastard. Now I'm certainly stretching the definition of ancient history on this one because this story actually takes place in the 50s, but with the amount of lore that surrounds it, I wanted to include it in this video. James Dean was an extremely successful male actor in the 50s and was one of the biggest heartthrobs of the generation. He's critically acclaimed and is potentially one of the best actors to ever play the cool, bad boy roles. Sadly, he was taken far too soon and died in a car accident at the age of 24. The car accident took place in a rural town in California. The accident was a head-on collision that he had in his sports car. This sports car was a silver Porsche 550 Spider, and James Dean affectionately referred to it as his little bastard. This car, although a super cool vehicle, is completely cursed. After Dean died, George Barris, a hot rod designer, purchased what was left of the car with the intention to sell it for parts. When this car was being worked on, it fell and completely crushed the leg of one of the mechanics who was working on it. This is when the potential of a curse started to materialize, but it would grow into so much more. The parts started to get sold and people started to notice a very horrible connection. Anyone who bought parts of this car started to die. The buyer of the engine of the little bastard died shortly after in a fatal car crash. Somebody who bought the tires got in a horrible accident when those same tires just blew out whilst they were on the road. The person who bought the transmission was sent to hospital with critical injuries after getting in a car crash. The truck driver who was moving the car's frame, he got in a horrible accident and he was killed. The amount of death and tragedy that ensued from this car is truly uncanny. The frame of the car that the truck driver was transporting was eventually stolen, and to this day, we don't know where it is. I hope whoever stole it though at least had the foresight not to ever drive with it, because the consequences could be dire.
Number 2. The Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism is an anomaly on its own. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's basically an ancient computer that uses the cosmos to predict astronomical events. Thought to have been the first analog computer ever created, and no, it wasn't made in a garage in 1997 somewhere. It was invented by who knows who, like 2,000 years ago. Captain Dimitrios Kontos and his crew of sea sponge divers discovered the Antikythera shipwreck in early 1900 just off Antikythera in Greece, hence the name. I also find it hilarious that divers diving for something you wipe your butt with found an ancient computer. Like, something about that just amuses me. They recovered tons of artifacts during the expedition, helping pull up the shipwreck and this precious baby. Many thought it was cursed immediately after its first handlings. Apparently after its discovery, 3 of the divers who dove down died shortly after its find. Presumably of course of the bends, of overwork, but locals think this device was to blame. At 150 feet deep, just off Point Glyphadia, the Greek island, the team retrieved millions in bronze and marble statues, pottery, glassware, jewelry, coins, and this ancient mechanism. It was a find of a century and still is. The device is made entirely out of a single bronze sheet, built in a wooden case about the size of a shoebox. The case and its faces are covered with Greek inscriptions, which indicate the device's astronomical and calendrical purpose. It's basically a computer built entirely out of cogs, wheels, gears, and faces, and it would tell you where you were amongst the cosmos. The first alarm clock, computer, calendar hybrid. Again, 2,200 years ago. Like, no machinery, no watches, no laser cutters. Basically everything we have in our iPhones right now within a wooden box 2,000 years ago. Again, it's funny, they were collecting sea sponges to wipe our butts and then stumbled upon a computer. Yeah. You can find it at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. And number 1, the Codex Gigas. Obviously, this one's gonna be my number 1 pick. Apparently it translates to giant book, and it's big. It weighs about 170 pounds. Yeah, I'm kind of like really uncomfortable what I've learned and read about this book. It's the largest medieval manuscript in the world. The manuscript is also known as the Devil's Bible due to its highly unusual full-page portrait and detail of Satan and the legends surrounding its creation. Illuminated Bibles were a typical feature of Roman monastic books, but even with this one, the page size alone of the Gigas is notably larger for its time, and it's made out of about 180 donkeys. Yeah, sorry. Poor little guys. The most famous myth is that the scribe traded his soul to the Prince of Darkness himself so that he could complete the book in only one night. Everything within the book has been handwritten by a single anonymous person. Created in the early 13th century in the Benedictine monastery of Bohemia, now modern-day Czech Republic, this book holds demonic power. The manuscript contains the complete Bible, Old and New Testaments, as well as all medicinal and cosmological knowledge, all written in Latin, and predated glyphs. However, it is, unbeknownst to any of us, missing 10 pages. Yeah, just ripped out missing. It's like a movie right there. Apparently some think the Codex was created by Herman the Recluse in the Benedictine monastery in the Czech Republic before being stolen and taken to Prague by the Emperor Rudolf II, who, fun fact, also stole the Voynich manuscript at one point. Yeah, this guy loved collecting like cursed, demonic, haunted scriptures, I guess. According to legend, the scribe was a monk who promised to create in one night a book to glorify the monastery forever, including all human knowledge. Near midnight, he became sure that he couldn't complete this task alone, so whipped out his pen and made a deal with Lucifer, asking him to help him finish the book in exchange for his soul. That's not really a good idea. It's thought it would have taken him at least 30 years non-stop writing to complete it. The book lays in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, where it is on display for the general public. Dude, I can't read Goosebumps without having nightmares, let alone going near this thing? Nah, I'm good.
Number 5 on this list is the dybbuk box. This is an evil box that tormented many people and even claimed some lives along the way. Zach Baggins writes, according to Jewish folklore, a dybbuk is a dark spirit that takes over the bodies of living people and uses them for evil. Legend has it that a dybbuk can be trapped inside of a box and prevented from causing mischief unless the box is opened, that is. Several years ago, the dybbuk box came up for sale on eBay. The seller listed a vintage wine cabinet that came from the estate of a woman who survived a World War II concentration camp. The seller, an antique dealer named Kevin Manus, claimed that the first owner's granddaughter was terrified of the box, warning him that her grandmother said it held a dybbuk. After buying the cabinet, he was plagued by a series of unfortunate events and recurring nightmares of an old hag that would brutally attack him, causing him to wake up with bruises on his body. He also experienced an overpowering stench of cat urine in his home. Tragically, his mother suffered a stroke while opening the box. Not surprisingly, he decided to get rid of it. The box eventually ended up in the hands of Missouri Medical Museum director Jason Haxton, who was skeptical about the powers attributed to the box. He soon changed his mind. After acquiring the box, he began to experience a series of medical maladies, including bleeding eyes and strange rashes. He also began to dream of being attacked by an old hag and would also awake with bruises on his body. Kevin Manus told me that while the box was in Haxton's basement, a man died there and his body was found lying next to the box. He eventually became so unnerved by the box that he reached out to scientists and rabbis who instructed him to build a wooden ark lined with 24 karat gold, place the box inside, and bury it in the ground. Now, this actually wasn't the end of the story for this box. The box was eventually dug up again and then later donated to a museum. This was after it had tormented a few more people, mind you, though. Now it's fully encased in a glass covering, but even that doesn't stop the evil spirit from coming after people. Many people who have visited this box have reported having serious episodes in the room while they're looking at it. Whatever spirit is trapped inside this box, it is clearly an extremely powerful one. The box remains on display at the museum, but I wouldn't recommend going to check it out if I was you. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Rocking Chair. The Devil's Rocking Chair is actually from one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's most famous case, The Devil Made Me Do It. Zach Baggins writes, the horror began in July 1980 when David Glatzel, 11 years old, became possessed by a demon. One night he woke up screaming, claiming that he had been visited by a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features, jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. David was, everyone agreed, not the kind of kid who liked scary movies or who was likely to make things up, and he was visibly shaken up by this experience. He became rather withdrawn and quiet. His older sister, Debbie, asked her fiancé, Arn Johnson, if he would stay with her family for a while and see whether it would help David get out of his depression. Arn, of course, agreed, but things didn't get better. David reported having more nightmares about the terrifying man who promised to take his soul. Odd scratches and bruises began to appear on the boy, and all the injuries seemed to happen while he was asleep. Odd sounds, which Arn couldn't explain, were heard in the attic. Worst of all, David began to claim that he was now seeing the beast while he was awake. He was always seen sitting in the family's rocking chair, which the beast now claimed as his own. David was the only one who saw the beast in the chair, but family members often saw it rocking back and forth, seemingly under its own power. This was obviously a lot, so the Warrens were brought in to perform the exorcism. The exorcism took place in that rocking chair, and it's thought that the chair itself itself still has some evil energy from this spirit attached to it. Now the chair resides at the Haunted Museum, but owner Zach Beggins actually took the exhibit down because the chair was simply too dangerous, he thought.
Number 1. Robert the Doll. Every good list of cursed objects should definitely include one cursed doll. I know we had the Shadow Doll up there, but that was like a starter cursed doll. We got better ones. So that's why we're going to finish up this list for today with a classic haunted doll. Dolls are just inherently a little bit scary when they're not being used for make-believe, and they're especially scary when they carry a series of unfortunate urban legends with them, like the case of Robert the Doll. Maybe you've even heard of Robert the Doll, maybe from this very own channel, maybe from this very own host, because I mentioned him in the first video that I ever did. It's all full circle. He's one of the more notable cursed dolls out there. If you're in the cursed doll community, you probably know him. Robert has been haunting for over a century. He used to be the property of one Robert Jean Otto, although he shared a name with the doll, he preferred to be called Otto. Maybe because of the doll he wanted to be called Otto. Anyway, Otto received Robert as a boy from his grandfather, who obtained the doll through unknown means. Trying to trace wherever it came from has proven fruitless, as no toy company has ever been found to have produced it. Now, the young Otto loved Robert and had a very active imagination to a degree that would unsettle his parents. He would refer to the doll in first person and brought it everywhere with him, even dressed it in his own clothing. Otto would say that he would hear Robert talk to him and would see him move. Children who passed the homestead when walking by would say that they claimed that they saw Robert in the windows watching them. Otto would blame all these mishaps on Robert. Injuries, breaks, anything that happened, it was because Robert had told him to do it, or that Robert the doll had done it. And this behavior kind of understandably deeply worried Otto's parents. Otto kept Robert until the day of his death in 1974, where he then traveled from home to home, causing a path of misfortune wherever he went, until he eventually found himself in the Key West Art and Historical Society, where he's now kept under very tight lock and key and has become the museum's most popular attraction, where visitors leave him offerings, treats, and even writing letters asking for protection or for him to curse others. Employees of the museum say sometimes they feel uncomfortable around him and have noticed a chill in the air by his seat or electrical malfunctions near where he sits. It's been said that they need to stay on his good side lest they provoke his wrath. Maybe it's a good thing then that he's locked up tight in that glass case, and there's just something about this guy. And Robert the doll, if you're watching right now, just want you to know all that stuff I was saying, I was just playing. You know we're friends. You know we've always gone together, you and I. You know I'm a big fan of the scary doll community. I just wanted to make it clear, we're cool.
Number 5. The Anguished Man. The tale of this rather disturbing looking painting is strange and steeped in mystery, but every scant piece of information we have on it is more unsettling than the last. The painting of a featureless man who seems to be screaming was apparently painted by a deeply troubled artist who mixed his own blood with his paints in an effort to get the right shade of red. Not long after completing it, the artist took his own life, and the painting found its way into a woman's care. She kept it for many years, but claimed that once she put the painting up, her and her family began to see a dark, shadowy figure roaming about their house. At night, they would hear strange sounds like footsteps and crying. The woman took the painting down and kept it locked in her attic for 25 years until she died, leaving the painting to its current caretaker, Sean Robinson. Sean had been warned by his grandmother that the painting was haunted, but he thought little of it. Robinson kept the painting in his basement for about a decade before rediscovering it and putting it up. Once again, the family began seeing the dark, shadowy figure roaming the halls and hearing the sound of weeping and moaning during the night. Sean began leaving a camera on by the painting to try and get evidence of its paranormal nature, and upon reviewing the footage, heard some odd noises and saw evidence of doors opening and closing seemingly by themselves, and the painting falling over onto the ground. As time went on, the activity became more and more intense, with his wife seeing a strange mist and an unseen force pushing his son down the stairs. Things went from bad to worse when guests who came to see the painting began reporting intense and sudden nosebleeds. Sean takes the painting out from time to time to show it to paranormal investigators and television programs who want to hear his story, but otherwise, the Anguished Man is apparently kept locked away in a safe location to prevent any further harm from coming to unwitting people. Number 4. Robert the Evil Doll. We've all heard of the cursed Annabelle doll that has permeated pop culture for the last decade, but have you heard of Robert? Robert was a gift to a young boy of the same name, Robert Eugene Otto, from his grandfather. The grandfather had been traveling in Germany and came across the doll who was not intended to be a toy, but a window display. He bought the doll for his grandson, who dressed it in a sailor's outfit that he had outgrown, and kept it with him at almost all times. As the young boy grew up, witnesses remember his relationship with the doll seemed to grow more and more unhealthy, with him referring to the doll as a living person and blaming mishaps on him. The boy, who went by his middle name, Gene, grew up to be an eccentric artist in a stately home known as the Artist's House. He kept Robert by the upstairs window, where children claimed to see him moving in and out of view. When Gene died in 1974, the new owner of the house, Myrtle Reuter, found the doll and became its new owner. Visitors of the house began reporting the sound of giggling and footsteps coming from the attic where the doll was being kept. When the doll was around people who spoke ill of its original owner, some claim that his facial expression seemed to change. After Myrtle got sick of the doll apparently moving around the home by itself and scaring guests for 20 years, she chose to donate Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Robert now resides in a locked display case to prevent the over 120-year-old doll from decaying further, but also to protect the visitors of the museum. But even those precautions don't seem to always work. Guests who insult Robert at the museum report experiencing tragedies in their lives not long after. This has ranged from people losing their jobs, getting divorced, breaking bones, getting into automobile accidents, and even a few deaths. The doll reportedly receives letters every day from admirers, people wanting the doll to curse their enemies, and a few from people asking Robert to reverse the curse they believe he has laid upon them.
Number 3 on this list is the Hope Diamond. Don't get me wrong, guys, I would love to have this thing, but I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze here. Google Arts and Culture says one of the most famous diamonds in the world, the Hope Diamond, originated in the Kolar mine in Andhra Pradesh, India. According to legend, the stone is cursed and brings misfortune to anyone who owns it. The curse is said to have come about when the original diamond was stolen from the eye of a statue. The thief met a grisly end, kick-starting a pattern of misfortune for all those who possessed the diamond. Over the years, owners of the Hope Diamond have befallen fates including death by murder, execution, they've taken their own lives, bankruptcy, and imprisonment. Thankfully, the curse seems to have been lifted when the diamond was donated to the Smithsonian in 1958. Now, I don't really buy into the fact that this curse is lifted, in my opinion. Like, literally, if you own this diamond, then you die or someone you love dies. That's what's happened throughout history. In the best possible case scenario, you just get hit with like horrible luck and lose all your money or some other horrible thing. There just really isn't any good way to spin this. Owning the Hope Diamond is pretty much a horrible idea. Number 2 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. Do not get on a boat if said boat is also carrying this mummy. Google Arts and Culture says the unlucky mummy isn't actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of a high status woman who lived in around 950 to 900 BCE. Discovered in Thebes in the 1800s, the 4 young Englishmen who first purchased the mummy all died in unfortunate circumstances. Rumors of the curse soon spread, and in the early 20th century, journalist William Thomas Stead wrote an article on the jinxed artifact. Stead went on to be one of the passengers on the doomed Titanic. It's said that he told stories of the curse in the run-up to the disaster, with many believing that the mummy itself caused the ship's watery end. Today, the unlucky mummy is on display in the British Museum. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Enter in the unlucky mummy, and boom, now the unsinkable ship goes down. Maybe it's a stretch to say that this thing caused the literal Titanic crash, but I can at least guarantee that it probably didn't help. At least this thing is now locked up in a museum very much on land and not connected to any boats that I know of. And number 1 on this list is the Hands Resist Him painting. I'm all about having some cool, groundbreaking art, but this painting definitely crosses the line. The lineup says there is no doubt the painting is disturbing. It shows a young boy standing next to a girl doll with hollow eyes and a sad, downturned mouth. The doll is holding a strange device with wires coming out of it. The The eeriest part of the painting are the many disembodied children's hands reaching toward the boy through the glass panels of a door just behind him. But even more disturbing than the painting itself are the stories of what has happened to people who come in contact with it. A few years after the painting was sold, the art critic Henry Seldes died. Then the gallery owner died. Then in 1984, John Marley died. The painting disappeared, not surfacing again until 2000 in a bizarre posting on eBay. The new owners were trying to sell it because they said it was haunted. They claimed the boy and the doll in the picture would fight with each other during the night, terrifying their 4-year-old daughter. They set up a motion sensing camera in the room for 3 nights and claimed they had captured the boy in the picture leaving the frame and coming into the room, apparently fleeing in terror. The literal kid in the painting is leaving. Not freaking cool, guys. My paintings are supposed to be static and not moving, and they definitely aren't supposed to be walking around my home scaring the living bejesus out of me and my family. Apparently this painting is locked up in a storage locker now and no one is allowed to see it.
Number 2. Headless Vikings. In 2008, a group of archaeologists were doing some fairly routine work in Dorset, a seaside town in England, in a rather dull job to improve local roads around the area. As could be expected, not too much of note was discovered, except for the mass grave of 54 headless Viking mercenaries. And not just were their skulls missing, but the rib cages, arms, and leg bones were all arranged neatly, surrounded by discarded teeth. No clothes or weaponry was discovered. So what happened? Because nothing my imagination is coming up with is conjuring anything good. Well, the bones revealed some fascinating finds, and I'll warn you now, by Odin's beard, they're all terrifying options. The teeth surrounding the grave were all filed down, but done neatly as if a craftsman had done it. Obviously, pre-Novocaine dental surgery wouldn't go down easy, so the process must have been excruciating, suggesting perhaps these men had it done to them out of some sort of punishment, or they did it to themselves to frighten their opponents and show them just how strong they were. Neither one of those options is particularly pleasant to consider. But now let's get spine chillin' with it. The archaeologists' prevailing theory about what happened to this big Nordic pile of bones is that looking at the wound patterns on the ribs and the torso bones were smart, surgical, precise blows, not matching with a rabid hack job you'd expect from a brawl. The archaeologists suggested that the Vikings weren't slain in battle, but rather offered up perhaps to some sort of strange, sadistic ritual, or perhaps a mass execution. It would explain why the men had no gear with them as well. The large number of bodies and intense cruelty of it suggests that there wasn't any trained executioners, leading to the prevailing theory that it's a dark, dark ritual. Number 1. Bog people. Name one good thing that's ever been found in a bog. Need some help? There's never been one. For peat farmers in northern Europe, it's a thankless life, working in wet, muddy bogs and occasionally finding leathery preserved bog mummies. Due to the low temperatures, lack of oxygen, and high acidity of bogs, bodies found there are preserved disturbingly well. Well, preserved is a bit of a misnomer. They're twisted and rived, but they're intact sort of. It's hard to think of these as preserved well because they look like the scariest things you've ever seen, but the process is weirdly fascinating if you're interested in looking up something disgusting. This happens all over northwestern Europe, with no one specific case to point to. It happens all over Ireland, Germany, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and so on. The bodies range from anywhere as old as 8,000 years old, preserved, to the most recent appearing to have been from the early turn of our century. Now, no one really has any idea how many of these bog bodies could be out there, and no one really knows how the unfortunate bog victims ended up in their final muddy resting spot. Some of them could possibly have just been unlucky souls who found themselves lost and fell in. But another prevailing theory is that Roman Iron Age people in northern Europe sacrificed people to the bogs, which sounds too dark to be real, but apparently is. They would also offer people as sacrifice or as punishment for their perceived social imperfections, which may I just say I am very glad this practice isn't commonplace, because I would be cast into the bogs faster than you could say peat deposit. Number 5. The Knife Blade Man. Discovered in 2018 in northern Italy, a group of archaeologists were digging up a massive gravesite of the Lombardo, an ancient Germanic people. Found in a necropolis, which is a very fancy word for a large, elaborate tomb, and maybe one of the best words in the English language, the team found hundreds of skeletons that were at the site, including horses and greyhounds, and for the most part, they're not particularly notable. You've seen one old bag of bones, you've seen them all, except for one skeleton that in the place of a forearm was an impressive blade. Now this raises countless fascinating questions. Who was this guy? Was this the first Assassin's Creed protagonist? Some legendary madman of a warrior who lost an arm and thought, I don't know, put a blade on there, I can still fight? Well, the Lombardo people placed a great emphasis on war and combat in their culture, so it is possible. The researchers noted that there was a clear dated buckle around his arm, and pressure on the bones of his arm showed that it was an intentional prosthetic, right down to the wear and tear on his teeth, suggesting he tightened the straps for his hidden blade with his teeth. Most of the other skeletons found in the necropolis all had blades buried with them at their sides, perhaps ritually out of honor, but this unique specimen had it grafted onto his arm like he's history's first cyborg or Baraka from Mortal Kombat. To be able to not only survive an amputation, pre-antibiotics and modern medicine is already impressive. And hey, if you're always looking to learn something from knife arm skeletons, then toss a subscribe our way. Top 5 Scaries always got a couple scary videos for you every day. Let's creep on creeping on. Number 4. The hanging coffins. We're going up to China for our next one, specifically Hubei, China. There's a cave there that the locals call the Cave of the Fairies, and you've probably already realized that there's gonna be a dark secret involved with the Cave of Fairies. We never talk about anything nice here. It was said that the mythical creatures were supposed to live in the cave, but those who explored it inside found that there wasn't much of anything living at all, instead finding something deeply disturbing. Rows and rows of coffins, some hanging from ropes, some jammed, wedged between the rocks of the cave. The coffins themselves were massive, weighing around 200 pounds each, and some destroyed and ravaged. Dating the coffins puts them at around 1200 years old, and are thought to have been put up by the ancient Bo people, an extinct culture hailing from China, famous for this unique practice of hanging coffins from caves. It's thought that this served 2 purposes. 1, as a ritualistic offering meant to bless the dead, and 2, from a practical, pragmatic sense, it would prevent any would-be carrion eaters from picking through to get a meal. Fascinatingly, it can be seen that all of the coffins were carved from a single tree, one big log. One wonders if that was part of the ritual element of it. Now, the coffins being smashed is interesting, because the discoverers of the coffins theorized that the damage was actually pretty recent, dating it to the 1960s. And their prevailing theory was that someone wandered into this cave in a place of desperation and smashed the coffins to garner some firewood in the hopes that they could survive the night and not pass among the hanging dead. Let's just hope they didn't release any ancient curses at the same time. Number 3. The black sarcophagus. Now, you might have heard of this one before. If you were on Twitter much a couple years ago, maybe you remember vaguely hearing about sarcophagus juice. Maybe those words are ringing a strange bell. There was a pretty good petition going around to let people drink the sarcophagus juice. But let's back up a bit. What is sarcophagus juice, and where did it come from, and why do we want to drink it? Well, I've got the answers. Somewhat. I've got some answers. In 2018, a team of archaeologists digging in Alexandria, Egypt, discovered a massive granite black sarcophagus, which immediately set off everybody's warning signs that you should not touch that. People wondered what the 30-ton stone slab could be containing, with some even suggesting it could have been the mighty body of Alexander the Great. People warned the archaeologists that there, could be some ancient evil, like when King Tut's tomb was raided and a very strange curse befell the explorers and excavators. Well, what they found wasn't a hidden curse, but honestly something stranger. 3 skeletons inside the coffin, with a skull shattered by an arrow, and a whole lot of mysterious black goop, or sarcophagus juice. So again, looping right back around it, what is the sarcophagus juice, and does it taste good? Well, scientists analyzed the sludge and discovered that it was made from a combination of animal fats, tree resin, beeswax, and crude oil. The sludge has been recovered out of multiple coffins and sarcophagi, so it's not exclusive to this dreaded one. But that doesn't explain why this nasty stuff is there. Well, there's some theories about this, no concrete answers, but I'll do my best. It's said that when someone died, they become a form of the god Osiris, who is associated with death and rebirth. Osiris was called the Black One, and is depicted with very dark black skin in the guise of a mummified body. As well, black is also a color associated with the deposits on the bank of the River Nile after a flood season. Fresh and fertile soil was seen as inherently regenerative. So it's theorized that with the linking concepts of Osiris and the regeneration of the soil, soaking and filling the coffins with this black sludge was a very confusing part of the mummification process.
Number 3. The Women from Lem statue. This limestone statue, also known as the Goddess of Death, was discovered in Lem, Cyprus in 1878. Its purpose, or exactly what it was meant to portray, has been lost to time, but many experts believe it may be a fertility statue of an unknown goddess. Whatever the reason for the carving, experts have concluded that it was carved sometime around 3500 BC. BC. After being found in 1878, it was purchased by a man named Lord Elfont. Within 6 years of having acquired the object, Elfont and all 6 of his family members had died under mysterious circumstances. The statue passed to a man named Ivor Manucci, who died along with his entire family within 4 years of the purchase. The same thing happened to its next owner, Lord Thompson Noel, and his family. The statue seemed to disappear for a time before being acquired by Sir Alan Biverbrook, who had a wife, 2 daughters, and 2 sons. Yet again, family members began to drop like flies, with Biverbrook, his daughters, and his wife all passing within a few years. Fearing that they would be next, Biverbrook's sons decided to donate the statue to the Royal Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland, where it was soon put on display. However, the statue was not quite done, and the curator who had handled the statue mysteriously died the next year. The statue is still on display to this day, locked in a heavy glass display case. Number 2. Thomas Busby's chair. Our next entry takes us to North Yorkshire in 1702, when 2 criminals, Daniel Otzi and his son-in-law Thomas Busby, came into conflict. They were coin forgers who essentially ran a criminal empire, but Daniel disapproved of Tom's relationship with his daughter. This resulted in a fight, which ended with Daniel's untimely demise. Thomas was arrested soon afterwards and sentenced to be hanged. There is some variation in what happened next. Some versions of the tale say that Thomas was arrested at his favorite pub, and others say he was allowed back into the bar for his last drink before his death. Whatever the case, before being taken away, he told the other patrons of the pub, "May sudden death come to anyone who dare sit in my chair." He was then taken away and as the local historian and poet William Grange described it, the bones of the poor wretch who had committed murder to fester in the sunshine and blow in the tempest until they fell piecemeal to earth, and tradition yet tells tales of night wanderers being terrified when passing the dreaded spot. While Thomas began apparently haunting the spot across from the inn where his remains were displayed, the curse he laid on the chair began taking effect. Over the years, many brave souls sat on the chair to prove they were not afraid and paid the price. In 1894, a chimney sweep sat in the chair and was found the next day hanging next to where Busby had been displayed. In 1967, 2 Air Force pilots sat in the chair as a joke, but when they were driving home that night, they crashed into a tree and did not survive. A few years later, a builder sat in the chair and fell off a roof later that same night. Not long after, a cleaner fell into the chair after slipping while mopping the floor and died of a brain tumor soon after. In 1978, the owner of the now renamed Busby Stoop Inn decided that too many deaths had occurred and donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum. Although they didn't technically lock the chair away, they did hang the chair on the wall, 5 feet off the ground, to prevent anyone from sitting on it and receiving Busby's fatal curse. Number 1. The Basano vase. Although it has fallen out of favor now, for centuries, a common gift given to brides on the day of their weddings were intricate ornate vases. Our next tale begins in the 15th century Italy and spans over 500 years. Legend says that on the day of her wedding, a bride in a village near Napoli found a gift with no clue which of the guests had given it to her. It was a 4-pound silver vase. She decided to put it in her room for safekeeping before the wedding ceremony, but when the ceremony was due to start, the bride was nowhere to be found. The groom went to her room to look for her and found her lifeless body on the ground, with no trace of what had caused the death, other than her desperately clutching the silver vase. The bride was buried, and the vase was passed on to one of her family members to be taken care of. Within days, the second member of the family was dead from unknown causes. The vase was given to another member of the family, and when he also passed away, the family made the connection between all the recent tragedies and the Basano vase. Unsure what to do, they reached out to a local priest who, upon hearing the story, informed them that whoever had given it to the bride had either cursed it or made it from cursed materials. He advised them to bury it on sacred grounds. They dug a hole and wrote a note warning, "Beware. This vase brings death," which they placed inside the cursed vase. The vase was buried and remained underground for the next 500 years. By horrible chance, a man in 1988 was digging and came across the vase. He read the note, but being the skeptical type, discarded it and took the newly found Basano vase to a local auction house. The vase went up for auction and was sold for the equivalent of $2,270 to the local pharmacist. Within 3 months, the pharmacist was dead, and the vase was sold by his family to to a local doctor, who also passed away soon after. The vase developed a reputation after this, and several people who were approached to purchase it refused, but it was eventually bought by an archaeologist who, despite his family's protests, did not believe in curses. He died 3 months later. His family threw the vase out their window, but a police officer who was passing by saw this and tried to return it. The family refused the vase back and told him of its cursed nature. He tried to give it to multiple different museums, but having heard about the curse, they all refused. Fearing for his life, he did what the bride's family had done over 500 years prior and buried it in a lead box in a cemetery. Which cemetery he used is unknown, but let us hope that no unwitting soul rediscovers this cursed vase and unleashes it upon humanity once again.
Number 1 on this list is the Crying Boy painting. Once again, stretching the term ancient here a little bit, but it ties into World War II, so I feel like it should be counted. Giovanni Bragolini was a Spanish artist who was famously credited with making a series of paintings of crying children. He made these in the early 1950s, and they were meant to symbolize all of the poor children who became orphans due to the brutal fighting in World War II. His initial market was tourists. However, these paintings, they started to really take off in Europe, and a lot of British families grew fond of them. For years, they were nothing more than just a painting, until in 1985, when the curse of the crying boy hit the mainstream. Ron and Mary lost their home from a kitchen fire. Even though their entire livelihood burned to the ground, the painting of the crying boy that they had, it lived on. It was the one item to survive from the fire. Ron's brother Peter was a fireman, and he said that this wasn't the first time that he saw this. In fact, he believed that he had witnessed the same phenomenon 50 times before. It was then believed that not only were these paintings immune to fire, but the owning of them would inevitably cause a fire in the first place. Mass hysteria ensued, and legends started to come out of everywhere in regards to these paintings. People claimed that it caused their family members to die, or that it was cursed with the soul of the children it depicted. Either way, this reached unparalleled levels, and finally a newspaper, The Sun, said that if people were to ship them their copies of these paintings, they would dispose of them. Over 2,500 copies were sent to this newspaper, and they burned all of them in a massive fire. I don't know if it really was the paintings causing these fires, or if they were cursed, but chalking it up to a coincidence seems a little bit too good to be true to me.
Number 5. Uluru Rock. If you're heading down under for vacation this year, well, there's a certain object that remains very cursed there that people don't really recommend you tamper with. And it's huge. Uluru Rock. Yeah, this massive sandstone monolith in Australia was discovered on paper in 1873 by surveyor William Goss. He named the landmark Ayers Rock in honor of the then Chief Secretary of South Australia, Sir Henry Ayers. Known as such, of course, until 1993, when it was officially renamed to Uluru, honoring the title originally given to the Anangu First Nations peoples, to whom the site is sacred and, more importantly, home. This thing is strange. First off, this place is highly sacred, stumbled upon by the First Nations people of the northern Aussie area for who knows how long. This site has been known over the eons to have strange powers, though, i.e. any tampering, stealing, defacing, or slandering the megalith is a sure way to test your luck against, well, the universe. This place shouldn't be messed with. One man stole a chunk of rock from the monument and experienced so much bad luck that he actually drove 3,000 kilometers to return it in person, in an attempt to rid himself of the karma he believed was attached to him. The chip was returned 40 years later. The largest piece of rock that was ever returned back to the site weighed more than 70 pounds. Yeah, this is serious stuff. First off, how the hell did you sneak that off the site? Like, did he just back his truck up to it like, yeah, just chip that big rock off, put it all in. He apparently wrote, "Dear Australia, I am so sorry I took this piece of Uluru. I wanted a piece of Australia to take home with me, and this was the wrong thing to take. I hope Australia can forgive me and welcome me if I ever come back. Signed, an unwise traveler." Yeah, the reason they advise visitors not to take anything is the paranormal omens connected to said rock. Also, this is a giant rock we're looking at, like only a tenth of its mass you can see. It's like an iceberg, like underground. So before you experience any bad luck, illness, or karma beyond karma any day soon, I'd just collect seashells and skip this whole thing. No? Number 4, the Voynich manuscript. As always, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure to hit that like button down below or comment down below which archaeological find you know of that has impending doom upon the discoverer. I love this stuff. It's scary beyond all belief, but it's interesting. We're all about it here. And speaking of, so apparently there's a giant Italian Renaissance-ish folio called the Voynich manuscript. It's named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-Lithuanian book dealer who purchased it in 1912. Yeah, we don't really know what this thing is. One thing it most certainly is would be the most bizarre and mysterious book of all time. 100%. Not only is it detailed so carefully and patiently, it's all like Tim Burton-like, with an entire world drawn and recorded that isn't ours. Like, is this a parallel universe book? Is this language even known? Like, it's unknown, like predates Latin and doesn't even use phonetic patterns and coding. It's the riddle of all riddles. Written in the 15th century, somewhere they think between 1405 and 1450, all 240 pages are inscribed in some sort of indecipherable language, with a small alphabet only of about 170,000 characters. Yeah, it's gonna take a while for them to crack this one. The contents alone have cursed people mad, with obscure visions and obsessions for years. My precious. Historians and cartographers have tried to crack the code for hundreds of years, yet not one has been successful. Why wasn't this a national treasure movie? I feel like this would have been perfect. Was it written by people from another world? An unknown species? It's so familiar yet so alien. Radiocarbon dating from the University of Arizona proved for all pages tested that once started, the writing was continuous for like 20 years. Protein testing revealed that the parchment was actually skin. About 150 calves slain for this Goliath mystery. It remains at Yale, waiting to be decoded to this day. Creepy! Number 3, metal balls. So, metallic floating shiny balls have been recorded for years. Giant metallic balls like this have been found literally littered around the planet for decades, apparently. Ufologist and professor at Stanford Gary Nolan is currently studying these metal Malteser-looking things right now that people have collected and auctioned off since the 50s. Right now in Texas, there's a dude who has a ton of these apparent real alien tech. Jim Marlin, famous music producer, was given these metal giant pinball-looking spheres by a celebrity's bodyguard, apparently, who said that they were dropped from a craft in his backyard in the early 50s. And like, a lot of celebrities have touched these. Dennis Hopper, Jane Fonda, that's Hollywood people. These things are famous on their own. They also move on their own, and apparently hold power and light up once in a while on their own. Yeah. That's not scary at all. Hey dad, after Survivor, can you just move your metal giant floating balls out of the living room? Yeah, mom asked me to ask you. In the 70s, the Betts family of Florida came across a small metal sphere the size of a bowling ball in the woods behind their house. Their first thought was the sphere was an old cannonball from a battle. They decided to take the sphere home, and when the sphere seemed to react to the sound of music in the house, making a throbbing, pulsating noise, later the sphere was even seen rolling on its own and would even stop and change direction in the house. Yeah, that's terrifying. Even the Navy went there and checked out these giant mysterious metal orbs. Every time I'm on Reddit seeing these like light orbs trucking around the skies, I can't help but think, is that them? Like, that's them. One thing's for sure, they don't seem to be made here.
Number 5, the Shadow Doll. Coming up on the number 5 spot today is part of the collection owned by the late Ed and Lorraine Warren, big top 5 scary fan favorites. One of the first items you'll see when entering the Warrens' Haunted Museum is this terrifying little shadow doll made of bird feathers and real human teeth. The Warrens' son-in-law and current proprietor of the now defunct museum, Tony Spera, offers a little bit of insight on the doll, saying it was originally acquired at an antique shop where it was being sold, with the owners of the shop being none the wiser of the doll's evil. That's completely on the antique shop owner though. You know, you come into a possession of a doll made of bird feathers and human teeth, your first instinct should not be to stick a price tag on it. You should toss it into the ocean or burn it, something like that. Spera claims that the doll's curse works by taking a photograph of the doll, and then when it develops, you write the curse that you'd like to inflict on the back of the photo, and you send that to your victim. And the person who opens the envelope and sees the doll in the photograph will invite the curse into your home. Now, probably a lot of pictures of the shadow doll behind me, or pictures of the shadow doll being interspersed in this video right now. I just want to tell you, I don't have any curses in mind. I didn't write any curses down. I don't have a negative thought inside my head, buddy. I barely have thoughts inside my head as is. If I would curse you with anything, I would curse you to always find loose change, always get texts back from your crush, and I'd curse you to always make the right amount of pasta. I'd only curse you good things. Now, the real question I have to ask about this scary shadow doll is, do you think it's jealous that it's not the most famous haunted doll in the Warrens Museum? I know I would probably have a very hard time sitting next to Annabelle all day. Everyone's coming to gawk and take photos at my movie star sister. Ugh, hard life. Nobody's gonna make any movies about me. No wonder that doll was cursing people. And if you're looking for more stories about cursed dolls, I've got lots and lots and lots and lots of those. And I've got lots of other scary things too. Aliens, ghouls, goblins, conspiracies, just about anything you can think up. I've done a video or two on it. So hit subscribe. Please make sure you hit that little bell as well. That means you get every one of the videos we make. But do that at the end of this video if you wouldn't mind, because I got 4 more crazy cursed objects coming up for you right about now. Number 4, cursed ballista balls. Like the last couple years had everybody acting pretty strange. I think it was unprecedented times. Maybe you binged all of Tiger King in a day. Maybe you got really into making sourdough. Maybe you returned a cursed artifact you stole when you were a teenager. We all went through some personal development. In 2020, a source that chooses to remain anonymous returned an ancient artifact that they'd stolen as a teenager to the Israeli government. A Bronze Age ballista ball fired during the Great Jewish Revolt by the Romans. The thief swiped them as a teenager when visiting with a group of friends and went on to live a fairly normal life, a successful career, found a partner, sired some children. Throughout his entire life, he felt as if there was a weight over him, as if he had some invisible presence of guilt weighing down on him forever. And he said no matter how long it had been, or how much his life had moved past this childhood act of delinquency, his heart could never move on from it, and he felt as if he'd been cursed to forever bear the guilt of it. During the events of the last few years, he said it stirred in him this apocalyptic feeling that made him want to return the ballista balls in the hopes of finally clearing his conscience. Do you think at any point during all that fun stuff during the quarantine and everything, do you think he was ever worried that he might have accidentally done it by moving those ballista balls and that's why he had to put them back? Through Facebook, he ended up getting put towards the right channels within the government to return it. But you know what's really bizarre about this bizarre story? This isn't even the first time this has happened, because in 2015 an almost identical story played out. In 2015, 2 ballista balls were returned to Israeli authorities alongside a note stating, "I took these in 1995 from a residential quarter at the foot of the summit. They have brought me nothing but trouble. Please do not steal antiquities." Well, I've got to say it's a nice change of pace to hear about people trying to undo a curse before anything got too heated. And you know what? I like these stories. It's a very easy to follow message for those of us listening at home. Don't steal antiquities. Unless you're Indiana Jones, that should be some pretty easy advice to follow in your life. Number 3, the crying boy painting. Some of my favorite cursed objects are a good haunted painting. Maybe it's because I had a huge fondness for Ghostbusters 2 as a little guy, and it's got a haunted painting as the main bad guy of that movie. Maybe it's just because I'm very enticed by the uncanny valley of a pair of eyes that you can look at but can never look at you back. We'll probably mention that in therapy next time. Anyway, case in point, take a look at this painting, the crying boy. Looks like a fairly normal painting, wouldn't look too out of place in your dentist's office. It's not really my kind of art, but I'm sure a generation of grannies love to put this in the parlor. It's been the center of a series of strange coincidences that are just too darn odd to be true. It was painted by an Italian painter, one Giovanni Bragolin, and mass-produced as a print across the 50s, so everyone could enjoy this sad crying boy in the comfort of their own home until they would burn down. Because for some bizarre, possibly paranormal reason, firefighters around Essex, London would report that frequently, amidst smoldering ruins of a burned down house, repeatedly they would find the crying boy painting completely untouched by the flames, even when everything else had burned to ash. Now, this happens once, that's bizarre. 2, very strange. If this happens 3 times, you've got yourself an outright paranormal mystery on your hands. The British tabloid The Sun loved the story and was spreading stories of the cursed paintings like a house on fire. Too soon? The Sun printed out warnings of people who owned the painting and that they should get rid of it, lest they find themselves smelling smoke. The story was so popular and people were so invested in the curse of the crying boy that the Sun tried to take it upon themselves to rid London of the curse by, get this, holding a bonfire in which anyone who owned a print of the cursed painting could come, torch it, and hopefully exorcise whatever demons had got into the printing press. The bonfire was a raging success, with sackfuls of the prints being torched, seemingly ending the curse of the crying boy. After hearing about this story though, does anyone else kind of want one of the prints? I don't know, there's something about it.
Number 2, the haunted book. Okay, so sometimes we all find spooky doodles from the past we drew as kids. Finding old spooky pictures or letters written, that can be fun and great for scary stories. Apparently I drew aliens a lot. Yeah, who'd have thought? This next item holds more than just letters though. It holds power. This haunted book was given to Brighton's very own haunted house, Preston Manor, after a Kent family who owned it claimed it caused them to be plagued by ghostly visitors and spectral visions. A haunted ledger which was found bricked up behind a shop wall has been acquired by the museum. Phew. The ledger was donated by Josephine Beniovitz. The book was discovered by her father, Tony Beniovitz, in 1988 when he was demolishing a shop which closed in 1984. Having taken it home, the father and daughter believed they suffered a number of spiritual visions and images of men, women, children, and apparently soldiers on horseback. The ledger, which dates from the First World War, was a clue at maybe who was visiting them. The daughter was told by one of the spirits that the book must be returned to Brighton where its first entry was written, which was in December 1915. The terrified family delivered it to Preston Manor, which is known for its paranormal occurrences and spiritual events. A medium visiting the house inspected the book and confirmed that they could sense evil omens emanating from its pages. It remains locked up only to be viewed after cleansed. Yeah, I don't think I'm going anywhere near this thing. Yeah, all those old books are usually wrapped in like someone's skin or something evil. Yeah. No thanks. And coming at the number one spot, the Iceman. This definitely had to be my number one spot. And it's not my favorite UFC fighter, Chuck Liddell. But this is the most terrifying find of all. Not really much of an item either, but more like a 5,000-year-old frozen and perfectly preserved human mummy that was discovered in 1991 in the Otzi Alps in Italy. Otzi, of course, is the name researchers chose to name the mummy for obvious location reasons. This frozen mummy is of a man who believed to have lived 5,300 years ago. Otzi is believed to have been apparently murdered before being frozen in its time. This is claimed after the discovery of an arrowhead found embedded in his left shoulder and various other wounds on his body. He also has multiple different DNA types on his clothes, suggesting he was in combat or in danger in his last moments. The nature of his life and the circumstances of his death need more investigation, but scientists believe he's Europe's oldest natural known human mummy, offering a very shiny new view of the Copper Age. A huge glacier surrounded him after he died of exposure and preserved his body in a mile-high ice cube. However, this is where it really gets spooky. Once unearthed, rumors of a curse surfaced too and grew stronger as people linked to him began to die, often in accidents or natural health problems. All in all, so far 7 deaths have been tied or loosely related to Otzi's de-thawing, including forensic pathologist who was killed in a car accident en route to give a speech about Otzi the Iceman, a mountaineer who died in an avalanche, a hiker who discovered the Iceman on a hike with his wife and later perished after falling down a treacherous path. A molecular archaeologist was found dead in his home after he was finalizing a book about Otzi. The head of the forensic team died of a heart attack, another discoverer died of a brain tumor, and another researcher perished of multiple sclerosis. Yo, say what you will about curses if you believe them or not, when people start dropping all involved in this one find, there's gotta be some sort of otherworldly connection going on here. Whatever the case may be, this find is one of the most scientifically precious and also one of the most spiritually terrifying. Should we study this mummy some more and unearth more mysteries of the past, or should we risk the lives of those who study it? Number 5, the organ. Music is the basis of like every good horror movie, isn't it? Music playing from the other room by itself? Yeah, that scares the shit out of me. When I forget my Bluetooth is on and I hear the music from the other room, my heart skips a beat. And there's some Shakespeare sonnets on there, you know, so it sounds like some dudes in the other room just talking to me in Old English. Well, there's actually an instrument that plays by itself, apparently, every night around 9 p.m. Unless it has priests bless it to keep it only wood and ivory. Apparently it likes to play a little number or two from the other side. Residing in the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, Ed Warren, the husband of the famous demonologist duo, apparently likes his classic music. Well, not live, I should say. He obtained the organ apparently after authorities cleaned out a haunted house owned by Reverend Eliakim Phelps in Stratford, Connecticut. Somebody from the authority at the city of Stratford reached out to Ed asking him if he'd be interested in obtaining a musical instrument in which needed some special handling. Nothing like a dusty old haunted organ, like the old hockey games and churches organs, you know? Apparently one night Ed was woken up by the sounds of the chords of the organ being played. It was late at night, so naturally Ed thought maybe someone had broken in and was fiddling downstairs with the instrument. Ed went down to check it out, and as soon as he entered the museum where the Warrens' haunted items are kept, the organ would just stop. Yeah. Creepy. And also annoying. Like, why do ghosts always do that? It's so like trickster of them, you know? This would happen over and over and over again. The organ finally stayed quiet semi-permanently when after the Warrens asked a priest to bless the organ on a regular basis. Apparently it needed to be continuously cleansed or else the mysterious pianist would start their eerie tune again. Yeah, organs have to be the scariest instrument on this planet. So Halloween-y sounding, you know what I mean? And so Dracula-ish. Toccata in D minor, just... Number 4, the wedding dress. Your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life, isn't it? Dressed to the nines, till death do us part, cake smashed into your face, yada yada yada, and of course, that iconic wedding dress, you know? Yeah, it's tradition. So what's this wedding dress doing in the Warrens Occult Museum then? Well, the official story behind the white gown in the Occult Museum is that of the White Lady of Union Graveyard. She has been spotted for decades. Many claim they have seen the lady in white at Union Cemetery. She's said to walk the graveyard at night, and locals tell us they've also seen her on nearby roads. Union Cemetery sits just off the junction of routes 59 and 136 in Easton, Connecticut. The legend goes, it's the home of a spiritual entity that allegedly walks the property. I can tell you that now for a fact that this place is haunted. It's one of the most haunted places around, said Lorraine Warren herself. Yeah, and she's seen some stuff in her time. One of the most infamous encounters is that late one night a man was driving down Stepney Road in his pickup truck just past Union Cemetery. Out of nowhere, a woman in a white dress appeared in the middle of the road. The man couldn't slow down in time and struck the woman head on. When the man screeched to the side of the road, there was no sight of the woman he had hit. Apparently this happens more often than you think on that road. Whoever she was, apparently the couple has her dress locked in the Museum of the Occult Finds and deems it spooky enough to leave it alone. Number 3, the purple sapphire. Well, not really a sapphire, but actually an amethyst. The spiky purple quartz looking thing. Hey, who said that haunted to hell items can't be precious and beautiful? Well, don't say that, because apparently this one is cursed, like cursed. The mysterious Delhi purple sapphire is now permanently on display as part of the Natural History Museum's vault collection of precious gemstones. The mysterious stone is rumored to have been stolen by a British soldier from the Temple of Indra, the Hindu god of war and weather, in Kanpur, India, during the Indian Mutiny of 1857. It was brought to England by Colonel W. Ferris, whose family then supposedly suffered many financial and many health problems. I love how financials first. The stone was given to Edward Heron Allen, a scientist and writer, in 1890, who claimed to have started having bad things happen to him and those who were lucky enough or unlucky enough to see or hold it. He came to the conclusion it was hexed with a curse, and eventually decided to have it stored away in a bank vault inside 7 locked boxes with a note of warning to anyone who dare handle it. Allen warned that the Delhi purple sapphire is cursed and is stained with blood and the dishonor of everyone who has ever owned it. Weary of its alleged powers, he kept it locked away in 7 boxes and surrounded by good luck charms. He also left strict instructions not to remove the amethyst until 33 years after his death. It's very specific. Heron Allen's own daughter was forbidden under every circumstance to even touch or handle the stone, which, half a year after her father's death, she donated the amethyst to the Natural History Museum where it's on display today. Okay, so his own daughter donated this thing. She didn't even want it. That's a little spooky. Now, I mean, he was a writer, and writers can exaggerate sometimes, but not giving it to his own daughter and her not wanting it at all after his death? That sounds a little bizarre to me.
In second place, we have the Carlson's knickknacks. So, this happily married couple in their 30s bought this old inn in New England. No big. So, Nathan Carlson traveled a lot during the week, but his wife, Alexandra, was home all the time to take care of their 2 daughters. Not long after moving in, Mrs. Carlson and her daughter began hearing footsteps on the 2nd floor where, in the past, lodgers used to stay. During the afternoon and late into the night, they'd hear dragging, heavy-booted footsteps move across the floor above them. Mrs. Carlson's older sister, who lived nearby, occasionally stayed overnight in the house and also heard these footsteps. The Carlsons had rooms set aside elsewhere in the house for, live-in farm help, and these men would hear the footsteps walking in circles around their bed. Sometimes, while Mrs. Carlson would be asleep at night, she'd be awakened by the spirits in the home, which would actually yank the covers off the bed while she was, in it. She later found out that very same thing happened to the farm help, which explained why the men tended to, quit so soon after they were hired. Eventually, the infestation phenomena upgraded into whisperings that could be heard behind closed doors. However, when Mrs. Carlson or her older sister checked the room where the whisperings were coming from, there was never anyone present. Although these spirits projected words that were often audible enough to be heard, the woman could never quite identify the language that was being used. And as time went on, the harassment continued. After the missus would straighten up the house, knickknacks and other little items would never be quite where she left them. Outside the house at night, lights would be seen in the attic, although there was no electricity up there. While painting a room one day, the heat was suddenly drawn away, and Mrs. Carlson felt a hand touch her shoulder. She said she became so angry that she threw the paintbrush in the direction where she believed the entity to be, and told it out loud, "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you're not gonna get me." Oh yeah, real smart. So this phenomenon went on almost daily, since this infestation had occurred in the house a long time ago. Exact date unknown. Both the kitchen and the bathroom water faucets would suddenly turn themselves on, full force at the same time. And on occasion, Mrs. Carlson would hear 3 knocks at the front door, which, that's a sign of an inhuman presence. But whenever she'd go to the door, there would be nobody there. On the second floor, a visitor reported seeing a snake on the window ledge after hearing 3 taps on the window, yet there was no nearby tree the reptile could have climbed. Ew, snakes, nope. Oh, it gets worse. While living in the house, the Carlsons had another spawn. And one night, while the missus was watching television in the living room, she suddenly heard a tremendous, powerful explosion. When she jumped up to check, thinking the furnace had kaboomed, she found the door to the infant's room violently torn open. Objects were still swinging and vibrating, and the temperature in the nursery was equal to a meat locker. Although the spirits in the home had evidently tried to kill the youngling, the little one managed to live through the experience. Thank goodness. However, when the spawn reached 3 years of age, Mrs. Carlson was walking past him as he played with some knickknacks from the living room, when he suddenly let go with a loud shriek saying, "You stepped on Beatrice!" So Mrs. Carlson put down the laundry she'd been carrying and asked, "Who?" To which he responded that Beatrice was his friend who told him what to do. Mrs. Carlson then told her son to ask Beatrice who she was, and after a pause he replied that Beatrice had told him to tell her that she's a witch. So the mom took away the items the boy was playing with and almost sent him into hysterics in the process. She tossed him into a basket in her bedroom closet, somewhere the boy was forbidden to go without her permission, and didn't really think about it until later that night when she was in bed by herself and saw a large black form in the room with her. She described the entity as being, blacker than the blackest night, moving slowly around the room, freezing her with fright. I swear I'm not a poet. Before the black mask went away, it transmuted into a globe of synthetic light about the size of a basketball, while producing a deafening roar, which she compared to a blasted furnace. This went on for many nights until the Warrens were called in, and like many other times I've mentioned today, took a tour of the home, blessed it, and realized the knickknacks were directly tied to the entity. Now, they've never described them in detail, so I don't have any clear photos to discuss today, but I'm assuming they're around the size of action figures if a 3-year-old was able to play with them. In first place, we have Bathsheba's jewelry box. So this is probably the most famous case on today's list. In January of 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange occurrences almost immediately. So this started with events that most of us probably wouldn't even register. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from place to place on its own, and the young girls of the home began to notice spirits around the house. Carolyn then brought it upon herself to research the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had passed under mysterious or horrible circumstances. The most haunting spirit of the home is that of witch Bathsheba Sherman. Being fairly well off, Bathsheba and her husband Judson had a son, Herbert, born when Bathsheba was about 37 years old, and while the couple gave birth to 3 others, they were unable to survive past the age of 7. One of the passings of a neighbor's ward in her care drew public attention during a post-mortem examination, when it was determined that the fatal wound was caused by a large sewing needle that had been impaled at the base of the skull. It's believed Bathsheba took offense to Carolyn moving into what she considered her home and wanted to take back that control. So the most notable incident overall was one afternoon when Carolyn said that she had been lying on the sofa and out of nowhere felt a piercing type of pain in her calf, and then the muscle began to spasm. And upon examination, she noticed a puddle of redness at the point of impact. She checked her bees or anything else that could have caused the puncture in her leg, but found nothing. In her daughter's book, Andrea Perron describes the wound as perfectly circular, as if a large sewing needle had impaled her skin. Now, if I were to summarize the entire hell the Perron family endured for the decade they lived in what they referred to as the Old Arnold Estate, we'd be here for an hour. But during one of the last instances, the Warrens were called in to help the ailing family, and they removed a box from the home after thoroughly blessing it, believing that it was acting as a conduit for Bathsheba's demonic energy to affect the home, this being the jewelry box.
Number 5, the Anguished Man painting. Yeah, at first I thought this whole thing was a hoax, but checks off all the right boxes, doesn't it? Artist is an unknown painter, there's real blood mixed in with the paint. The artist then took their own life after they finished the painting. Sounds a bit made up. Well, The original owner, Sean Robinson, claims that his grandmother was the one who actually inherited this painting and gave it to him, saying that there was real blood mixed into this. Okay. His grandmother had claimed that the picture had always seemed to be attached to evil, and even saw a dark figure resembling a man always standing around the painting. After having strange things happen around Sean's house, he too said that he started seeing a shadowy figure, almost like a man now, standing at the bottom of his bed night after night. Sean decided to reach out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators from Connecticut. He tried keeping the painting around at one point, even tried to sell it online, but for some reason it never sold. Sean said the painting became too dangerous and things were getting worse around the house, and decided to give the Warrens the painting for safekeepings. Good idea, Sean. They have the painting locked away in their basement at their home, aka the occult museum for everything haunted. The painting is kept out of sight and no one is allowed to even look at it in person, for it draws evil energy, right? What do you think? I mean, the more I look at this thing, the more it scares the hell out of me. It is jarring. Number 4, Devil's Rocking Chair. I love a good rocking chair. Something soothing about it, you know? All the motion. Very relaxing. Rocking chairs. Rocking on their own, however. No, I don't do that at all. And this one is supposed to be you-know-whose personal chair. The Devil's Rocking Chair, which was bought for $67,000 from Ed and Lorraine Warren's site, is in the care of one Zach Baggins. This guy runs a haunted museum in Vegas and purchased the chair understanding fully what it does and is. The chair, originally used in the exorcism of David Glatzel in the 80s by the Warrens themselves, a true case involving murder and demonic possession. A true case. Some have seen a beast sitting in the chair, some have seen a dark shadowy man. And the horrifying part, Baggins had to shut down his exhibit in 2019 because the chair was causing guests to have emotional breakdowns and episodes. One guest even passed out walking directly above the chair on the staircase. Slowly started to become a safety hazard, and Zach decided to remove the newest haunted item from his exhibit completely. Before Zach put the rocking chair in his exhibit, he said the only day it was in his home, him and a friend both had a very strange breakdown. Both of them crying uncontrollably and even speaking religious sayings obsessively. Number 3, Thomas Busby chair. I thought it would definitely be more like skulls and dolls and stuff, but it seems so far that it's pretty much only furniture holds evil spirits. How about that? Another chair. Haunted, of course, and this tale is a chilling one. Not like the others aren't. The Thomas Busby stoop chair, or also famously known as Dead Man's Chair, is said to be a cursed object from the owner himself, Mr. Busby. This hardwood, allegedly haunted oak chair was cursed by the murderer Thomas Busby before his execution hanging in 1702 in North Yorkshire, England. Thomas Busby was arrested, tried, and condemned to death after he murdered his father-in-law, Daniel Otzi, in 1702. Otzi and Busby were running a coin counterfeiting business. After an argument about the business, Busby killed Otzi. One variation of this story has Busby cursing the chair while on his way to the execution, whereas another says he was drunk in the chair that he was arrested in and cursed it right then and there. Due to the many deaths later attributed to people sitting in the chair, the landlord donated it to the Thirsk Museum in the same town where it is having difficulty with guests sitting on top of it. It now stays hung above the floor near the ceiling where no one can even sit on it. That's good. Numerous deaths have been linked to this chair, from soldiers not returning home from war, to delivery drivers crashing their trucks hours later, to people even having strokes and heart attacks sitting in it. Death seems to be imminent anywhere this thing goes. It's been hung up since 2014 and remains there today.
Number 2 on this list is King Tut's statuettes. King Tut's tomb didn't just have one cursed item, it had multiple. His burial mask is pretty widely known, but many don't know the story of 2 statuettes that also came from this tomb. These were 2 small bronze statues found inside the tomb. One of them with their hand over their heart and the other one with their hand over their mouth. Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the initial excavation, gave these to a friend as a gift. This was meant to be in good faith and a friendly gesture, but he had no idea the trouble that they would cause. The name of the family is omitted in this story to protect their integrity, and the person who received the statues is simply referred to as James. James received these statues and brought them back to America with him, but then started to suffer the consequences. Once wildly successful, James started to lose everything: his company, his money, his family. James went through 3 failed marriages, a complete collapse of his immense fortune, and finally died of illness without ever realizing these statues were part of the problem. He left them to his grandson in his will, and the curse continued. When his grandson took hold of these statues, he was a decorated Olympian, but he also suffered a serious fall from grace. Injuries, other accidents, and failed business ventures plagued the grandson from the second that he took hold of these statues until finally he called the museum. He donated them to the museum so that they could be put with some of the other King Tut pieces and the curse could finally be lifted from his family. Now, it's certainly possible that this was all a coincidence and this family just got down on their luck at the wrong time. But anything involving King Tut has the potential to be cursed, and I wouldn't be surprised if these statues were part of that. Number 1 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. The Unlucky Mummy is an ornate wooden coffin that was found in an ancient Egyptian tomb. This coffin's preservation was remarkable for how old experts thought that it must be. The coffin was said to hold the remains of ancient Egyptian princess Amun-Ra. The legend says that in 1890 some British men stumbled upon this casket at an Egyptian excavation site. There were 4 men and they all suffered greatly right after coming in contact with this coffin. The first man, who initially took ownership of the coffin, was seen leaving his hotel and walking straight into the desert to never be seen again only after 1 day of possessing said casket. The second man on the very next day was accidentally shot and had to have his arm amputated. The third man, when they did eventually get back to Britain, returned to see that all of his life savings were gone. And the last man died from disease shortly after the discovery of this artifact. And just like that, the curse of the Unlucky Mummy began. Now, there are some misconceptions with this mummy. Some people believe that the Unlucky Mummy got put onto the Titanic ship and that's what caused the Titanic to sink. That was never the case though. In fact, once the coffin got to Britain, it's never left. That doesn't mean that this thing isn't still cursed though. It currently resides at the British Museum in London. Since its arrival there, other rumors about this ancient artifact have come out, such as the untimely death of writer Bertram Fletcher Robinson. He was convinced that there was no curse surrounding this coffin. In fact, he even wrote extensively on that topic, but then he died shortly afterwards. Incidents like this have happened all throughout history, further solidifying the curse around this coffin. With everything that's happened to it, the term unlucky might just be a bit of an understatement.
Number 5, St. Catherine's head. Coming up first on our list of strange artifacts that the Catholic Church has hidden away is the severed, mummified head of the revered St. Catherine of Siena. You wouldn't really expect there to be a severed head kept out on display, but it is an important head, I've come to understand. When she was young, St. Catherine had a vision of Jesus on a throne surrounded by saints. Afterwards, she devoted her life to Catholicism and she gave herself to the nunnery, cut her hair, scalded herself, and took a vow of celibacy. At 28, Catherine was said to have received the stigmata when 5 red rays shot out of the crucifix she was praying to and pierced her hands, her feet, and her heart. But these were far from the only miracles attributed to the lovely St. Catherine, however. She was said to be seen levitating once during prayer, and even once a priest said he saw a Holy Communion fly from his hand directly into her mouth. Now, I will be honest, that does make her sound a bit like a saintly golden retriever, but okay. Catherine would pass at the young age of 33 and would be canonized a century later. If you don't know, that's a fancy word for being made into a saint post-mortem. While she passed in Rome, there was some disagreement as to where the young saint should be laid to rest eternally. Her hometown of Siena quite wanted her body back. Her spiritual leader, Raymond of Capua, knew he wouldn't really be able to smuggle her entire body past guards in Rome, so he elected to just take her head in a bag, which normally would be terrifying behavior, but it's good here. The story goes that when the guards intercepted Raymond, he prayed to Catherine, and when they looked inside his sack, they found naught but a collection of rose petals and not a severed head. Her final miracle. Now, the head was placed in a reliquary. That's a difficult word to say, especially on a teleprompter. The head was placed in a reliquary where it still remains today, and you can go and pray to it, and I promise it's not gonna blink or anything at you, even though it looks like it just might. And if you're looking for way more stories of creepy relics locked away, haunted object, cursed things, cryptids, conspiracies, aliens, the whole scary 9 yards, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So hit that little bell, hit subscribe, and make sure you do not miss a single thing. Do it after this video, okay? We got way more creepy things locked away coming up for you right now. Number 4, the Grand Grimoire. Our next entry has been formally referred to as the Gospel of Satan and is said to be a cursed book whose knowledge had to be sealed away to protect humanity. So this might be the most deadly book ever published after Hop on Pop. The Grand Grimoire, who is said to have been penned by a priest in the 16th century, who was possessed by a litany of demons who compelled the man to put their knowledge to paper. Acting as a scribe for these demons, the man wrote everything they knew about dark incantations, spells, instructions on how to cast rituals, ways to bind a demon to you to make it your little minion and do your bidding. Wait, a demon gave instructions on how it wants to be bound to a human to serve humans? Freaky little demon. That's not all too. There is a step-by-step recipe for a little necromancy if you're down to dabble in some dark arts and make some bones dance to your rhythm. The book really covers all the fun stuff you have been told not to do. It's not just brimstone and hellfire neither. There's rituals to help manipulate luck, how to conduct a seance, and I actually think this is adorable. There's even ways to make people love you in there. But dating tip from old Tay, if you need a demon's help to make them like you, it might not be the strongest relationship. So just a heads up. Now if all of this is sounding super appealing, and I don't blame you, I played a necromancer in Skyrim, I want to make the bones raise. Just know that this book is considered high treason. Even so much as cracking the spine is considered equivalent to selling your soul. So, you know, maybe hold off on that Amazon order for a bit. Also, I'm pretty sure the copy they're selling on Amazon is not the original, because due to the book's cursed reputation, the original copy is said to be locked away in the Vatican's secret archives, and I'm sorry, but no matter how many times you ask, they're not gonna let you look at it, even if you swear you're just taking a little peek just to look at the illustrations and maybe the dedications. They're gonna keep it locked up. I know. Number 2, Mother Mary's Milk. We're gonna do our best to get through this, I promise. Mother's Milk might be my favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers album. It's my favorite character on The Boys, and it might just be one of the oddest relics on a series of odd relics that's all the way to part 3. Took a lot of restraint to not put this in the first 2, but we're on part 3, so here it is now. As incredibly odd as it may sound, the Virgin Mary's Milk is considered a relic of the Catholic Church. I hope they've been keeping that in the fridge, lest it spoils. Does holy milk spoil? Is everything I've said in this video profoundly heretical? There is a church called the Church of Milk Grotto, built outside Bethlehem. The history goes that the Madonna and child had taken refuge in this cave, and while she was feeding, milk spilled outwards and blessed the stone of the cave, turning it completely white. Now, the church serves as a popular shrine for women who are struggling with fertility, who hope that the lasting aura and presence of the Virgin Mary will bless them. There's a legend that goes with it. Saint Bernard, the saint, not the big dog that has his tongue hanging out, was devoted to the Mother Mary. And one day, he was praying at a statue of the Madonna, and he asked it to give him some sign, some proof that she was a mother. I guess the statue has like an odd sense of humor, because it sprayed milk onto Saint Bernard. Depending on the variation of the story, either his eye or in his mouth. I saw a lot of really interesting paintings depicting this scene, and editors, I hope you're having so much fun trying to find photos for this one. I am so sorry. Truly, rest in peace your search history. In the Middle Ages, vials of the milk were sold and transported all over Europe. For what purpose, I could not tell you. These days, the Church of Milk Grotto sells a limestone powder made from the stone walls of the grotto, meant to be dissolved in a drink and consumed. Kind of like Crystal Light, but it's holy milk. Probably heals all that ails, and it's a good source of calcium, perhaps. And number 1, the holy prepuce. This is going to be the one that takes the channel down. You have no idea the restraint it's taken me to only be bringing this up now in part 3 of strange relics. This is probably the strangest relic of them all. We'll do our best to discuss this with reverence and also somehow figure out how to stay within content guidelines. Editors, best of luck. When Jesus was born, on his 8th day, a small piece of his skin was removed in a traditional ritual performed on Jewish men when they're born. Okay? Are you sort of following along with what I'm saying here? This particular part of the body that I can't quite mention that was removed at birth was an immensely holy relic to the Catholic Church called the holy prepuce. Now, the very bizarre part regarding the history of the holy prepuce isn't just that it exists at all, it's how much trouble one bit of skin would cause. You see, the prepuce first pops up in the year 800, when Charlemagne gave it to Pope Leo III on December 25th, making it one of the oddest Christmas gifts ever given in human history. From here, it stayed until 1527. Now, when Rome was sacked, a German soldier stole the prepuce and tried to keep it for himself, until it was eventually recovered again and became the centerpiece of the village of Calcutta, where it was seen as the most exciting thing to happen in a while. It was like a celebrity showed up to the village. It was this great, big, important deal. They had a part of the body of the Savior. All manner of miracles are reported to have been the result of the holy prepuce. However, several other churches, villages, priests all claimed that they had the true holy prepuce, and any other ones you might have heard of out there were false. This problem became rampant, and in the early 1900s, the church wanted to wash their hands of the holy prepuce entirely and outright forbade any discussion of it in church matters. It was actually an excommunicable offense to so much as bring up the prepuce, meaning this video is pure heresy. In 1983, the prepuce was stolen from the church in Calcutta. Where is it now? Where did it go? Absolutely no one knows. No one's fessed up. You know, if you took it, I think now's a good time to just admit you did it. But if they're ever looking for a plot line for a third National Treasure movie, I have an absolutely amazing idea for something Nicolas Cage could steal.
In 5th place, we have a cursed wallet. So this tale begins in October of 1972 when an officer at the United States Military Academy contacted the Warrens a day before they were scheduled to present a lecture to the cadets there, informing them that a curious security problem had arisen and, could they possibly help? Now, obviously they said yes, or else we wouldn't be talking right now. So the next day, at a little past 4 in the afternoon, they entered the gates of the academy and were escorted to the office of Major Donald Wilson. So the Major went on to explain how an unaccountable breach of security was occurring in the home of West Point's commanding general. Ed asked the Major if he knew the nature of the problem, to which the man replied that there was a ghost in the general's quarters. So the Warrens were soon escorted to meet the general and his wife, where they were directed into a sitting room, where the general explained that, well, nothing macabre had happened. A number of curious incidents had occurred without any kind of explanation. So, some background, in the basement of that building there is a private study that at the time was kept locked and secure, but no matter how many times the bunk in there was made up, it was always found ripped apart later. Upstairs, ghosts had been seen flitting about the house. Oh, and personal belongings and other important articles were regularly found missing. The man emphasized not stolen, but just missing temporarily. Later, all these stolen items would be found upstairs, neatly laid out on the dresser in the general's bedroom. So he asked Ed if this could be, caused by a ghost, and Ed confirmed that it was indeed a possibility, and probably like a human ghosty and not a demonic spirit. Lorraine offered to walk throughout the home to try and, establish where the spirit might be present, while Ed and Major Wilson headed for the basement with the key to the downstairs study. As usual, the bunk was torn apart as though someone had been sleeping in it, while nothing else was disturbed. So while Lorraine did her walk through the house, she picked up impressions of the powerful individuals who had spent time in the home in many, many years over the years, but hardly any sense of a mischievous spirit. She offered to enter a trance state later that evening, after the presentation, to attempt to contact the spirit, and the group, was like, alright, you do you, let's try this. So much later that night, after the events of the day, the group made its way upstairs to the MacArthur bedroom. All lights were turned off but one, and Lorraine closed her eyes. She described seeing a black man wearing a dark uniform with no markings, who was overtaken with a sense of fear, guilt, and lack of acceptance. He told her that he'd been accused of killing, and his cell was in the basement, but the army had exonerated him of that crime. He was very sorry, and could not hold his sorrow any longer. He told her that his name was Greer, and spelled it out clearly for Lorraine, and she was able to convince him to pass over into the light. So after she exited her trance, Lorraine gave a complete description of the man and said at the end that he had simply vanished, and mentioned that he had left his wallet in that downstairs bunker. So the general is adamant that based on the uniform Lorraine had described, no black men had served at West Point during that time. But, he mentioned he would look into it and thank the Warrens for their time. Goodbye, alright, sure. A few weeks later though, Ed and Lorraine received a phone call from the general. It was discovered that a black man, a porter by the name of, Greer, had served there. So he had been assigned to the Thayer mansion in the early 19th century, and he'd been accused of committing death, but the army did exonerate him of it. His records had been out of order, and he would now be officially filed as deceased. Also, the walls in the bunker had been renovated, and the wallet was finally found. What do you know? The army offered to mail it to the Warrens just to be safe, and it has stayed in their museum ever since. In 4th place, we have the Snedeker family rosary beads. And as you might expect, this true story begins in the witching hour, in the wee small hours of the morning. Because if rosary beads aren't scary enough. One night, very late at night, Ed and Lorraine were contacted by this family who had just moved into a house on Meriden Avenue in Southington. Specifically, the mother of the family unit and a niece who came to stay with the family were on the phone. And, So originally what they found and bought was a big and seemingly welcoming home. But what they didn't know when they bought it was that it was a former funeral home. Oh, and fun fact, the morticians at the funeral home were allegedly involved in necrophilia, or performing sex acts with corpses. And what used to be the showroom for the coffins was now where the younglings were. And just down the hall from that was the place where the bodies were prepared for viewing. Yeah, not grim at all. So the boys were the first to start talking about things they had seen and experienced, saying they were absolutely terrified, and the parents, chastised them at first for it, but the boys were so scared they started sleeping on the floor in the living room. Among the sounds they would hear were the sound of chains pulling the coffins upstairs, and there were no more coffins in the house. So the woman who called the Warrens were terrified, with the niece in a small bedroom in the back of the house, and the covers on her bed were levitating around her like there was a fan blowing them around. Lorraine said while the mother was on the phone with her, even more bizarre events started happening. So remember those rosary beads? Yeah, she had them in her hand, and while she was speaking, the beads were actually being pulled apart and falling to the floor. Lorraine and Ed went over the next morning with the family's parish priest, and a blessing of the house seemed to do absolutely nothing to calm things down. And that's when the Warrens decided to call the bishop's office. So the church eventually sent an exorcist, which seemed to sort of do the trick, but not before one last hurrah from whatever the heck was believed to be haunting the house, because demons don't like to give up without a fight. There was this huge tree in front of the house, and half the tree, with no wind, broke off and fell on the property. The family moved the heck out of Dodge a short time later, and Ed and Lorraine kept the rosary beads that had been pulled apart, because if a demonic spirit can touch a Catholic relic, that means it's been infested with something absolutely awful, and they didn't want to risk the beads spreading throughout the world and causing even more damage. Yeah, that makes sense. In third place, we have a long black spike. So what appears to the innocent eye is nothing but a fence stake, perhaps left over from a construction project of sorts, actually holds a history of sadness and evildoing. Being the oldest item listed today, its history dates back to its use in the 1700s. While the name of the witch it belonged to has been lost to time, the spike was originally used in a black mass ritual in an attempt to summon Satan himself to this world. The witch we're speaking of had attempted to curse the stake over the course of her pregnancy, hoping that it would become strong enough to take the soul of her womb in exchange for the devil. During the ritual, she plunged the stake into the flesh as sacrifice, but while it strengthened her relationship with Satan, it did not succeed in bringing him to earth. The stake was passed down as a family heirloom, bringing a feeling of longing and sadness to any that held it until it was finally acquired by the Warrens. Knowing that the museum is technically closed, I worry if any vandals break in, the damage they could do with something that looks so unassuming, but it's so dangerous.
Number 2, the cursed mirror. Originally sitting in the main foyer in its 17th century antebellum home in Louisiana, this haunted object has been witness to some nasty history. The Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana is the home to deep-rooted slavery. The American South is known for its disgusting use of slave labor and would be the home in which this haunted piece sits. The house owned first by Mr. and Mrs. Clark Woodruff. These were racist plantation owners, and violent ones at that. It is said that the couple were very sadistic towards abuse of the slaves. A young woman by the name of Chloe was particularly abused when eavesdropping on a conversation Woodruff was having one night, resulting in him cutting both of her ears off. That's so unnecessary. Her mutilation was hidden, but Chloe planned her revenge quickly and decided to poison a cake which Mrs. Woodruff and her 2 children would be eating. She killed all 3 of them and was caught, tried, and hanged for her crime. It is Chloe's ghost in which experts say haunts the cursed mirror from the plantation. Ghostly women are seen in the mirror walking by, and smudged handprints are always seen, even with new trimmings and polished glass. The cursed mirror is believed to have Chloe's spirit trapped inside of it. By gazing into the mirror, evil things apparently would happen, resulting in health problems. Weird things happen around this mirror, and where it lays now, that's Ed and Lorraine's business. Ed and Lorraine are taking care of it, of course, thank God, and it sits in the couple's occult museum in Connecticut. Ungazable. Today, the Myrtles Plantation has been changed into a bed and breakfast, but still remains one of America's most haunted houses. What do you think? And coming in at number 1, Annabelle. Possibly the most infamous and dangerous possessed artifact found at the home of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Their occult museum is the home of the Annabelle doll. We know a little bit about this doll, of course, with all the films about her in the last couple years. Tons of people have flocked to the museum to take pics in front of her vase. She rests inside a glass case ominously marked "Warning. Positively do not touch." Warned. She was previously owned by a nursing student, Donna, in 1970. Gifted from her mother from a thrift store, after some creepy incidents involving the doll levitating onto the table and moving around by itself, she took the doll to a medium who revealed it is possessed by the spirit of a little girl who died young. Ed and Lorraine were eventually called after the incidents would not stop, and they offered to take it to their home. However, this is the scary part on the drive home. Ed himself said that the doll was making the car do things out of his control. Stuck stuffed in a bag, doused in holy water, he still felt the presence. The engine kept turning off, power steering would all of a sudden lock up. The hardest part was getting it into a safe locked case in their museum, where it's been ever since. Thank goodness. The doll holds evil power and demonic possession, Lorraine says, and she refuses to even make eye contact with it. Yeah, you know it's bad when they won't even look it in the eye, huh? The museum unfortunately has been shut down since 2019, but the cursed objects still seem to be staying put. Thank goodness.
Number 5. Oliver Plunkett's head. Now, in the other 2 videos, we talked about the head of St. Catherine of Siena, and we also talked about St. John the Baptist and how many heads he may or may not have had scattered across the world, and I'm not one to break tradition, so I thought for part 3 I would include a third holy, saintly severed head, this time belonging to Oliver Plunkett. A notable difference between the 2 other severed heads is that this one is probably the most disgusting one we've included on these lists. I know these are all holy relics, but let me just say, out of context, this is absolutely horrifying and looks like it's straight out of a grindhouse horror movie that you'd find in a dirty basket somewhere. Oliver Plunkett, before becoming a head, was an Irish Catholic archbishop who was a victim of the Popish plot. Now, if you're not up to date on your Catholicism, that's a whole other video worth of explaining. I don't know much about the Popish plot. I'm not the guy to do that for you. But the short version is that it was a conspiracy falsely alleging that there was a plot against the Protestant king Charles II. Oliver Plunkett happened to end up on the receiving end of something really bad. Namely, he was executed, which is pretty bad. But they really went out of their way to destroy Oliver Plunkett, his public image, his body. They called his praising of the Roman Catholic Church high treason, and his punishment was a slow and arduous death. He was hung, drawn, and finally quartered. And just in case there were any odds of him pulling through on a miraculous recovery, as a final effort, they yeeted his head into a fire, where it was rescued by a friend of Plunkett. I'd like to think I would do that for my friends. Well, after being recovered, the head was rescued and stored hidden away in a nunnery, eventually brought to Ireland in 1995, where he's now kept on display in the National Shrine to the Saint. He was canonized for his troubles, and he is the first new Irish saint in about 700 years. It's high time for some new blood, I think. So, you can go, you can pay your respects to him, and maybe offer him some skin cream, because that skin's looking a little dry. And if you're looking for more creepy videos on weird relics or all sorts of strange things, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. If there's something scary, the odds are pretty good we've got a video or 2 on it. And if you haven't already, subscribe, hit that bell for more videos every single day. But do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more weird Catholic relics coming up for you. Number 4, St. Teresa's hand. Now, if you've watched our other videos on this subject, then no doubt you're already very familiar with the practice of making remnants of saints into relics. Now, something that's directly from a saint is called a first-class relic. That means it's something that came off of their body, you know? Their hair, their fingernails, a vial of their fluids, or in the case of the lovely St. Teresa, her whole hand. Encased in a beautiful, ornate golden reliquary with gems all over the knuckles, and the editors are goofing off because that's just a picture of the Infinity Gauntlet from Avengers Endgame. Wait, that's what it really looks like. Yeah, it seems that Marvel Studios was more than inspired by the incorruptible St. Teresa's hand when designing the weapon that would give Thanos the power to wipe out half the universe. Throw a comparison pic of them side by side, they're almost indistinguishable. I'm not 100% certain if there's any symbolism or connection there, but I'm sure St. Teresa would love to know she was involved. She was a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all the things they do. When St. Teresa of Avila passed away, the sisters of her convent buried her with the hopes of keeping her holy body with them. 9 months later, she was exhumed, only to discover that her body was intact. She hadn't decayed at all. That's why they thought she was incorruptible. Now, I'm not sure I totally follow the logic here, but after they discovered her body was incorruptible, they took her hand off and put it into this golden Infinity Gauntlet thing, as a way of inviting people to get closer to God through the saint's body. Now, this might not seem appealing to you, but there's a surprising demand for this relic. Near the end of the Spanish Civil War, General Francisco Franco had the hand removed from the convent and allegedly kept it close by, and if some of the wilder rumors are true, he would keep it by his pillow for good luck. You really gotta hand it to him. He was a devout follower of the faith. Today, you can find the hand in Iglesia de Nuestra Señora de la Merced in Ronda, Andalusia, and you don't even have to rip a stone out of the Vision's forehead to get a good look at this gauntlet. Number 3. The Veil of Veronica. Now on these lists of holy relics, we've had all sorts of strange things. We've had fingernails, teeth, dried up hands, we got milk coming up later, all things that have come from the body. Well, this next one is no different. It's the Veil of Veronica, and to put it gently, it's a sweat rag that's a few thousand years old. Probably one of the most pungent odors on the planet. Imagine every gym locker room you've ever been in times 1,000. When Jesus carried the cross, bruised and beaten, there was one person among the crowds who saw fit to help him out a little. Veronica wiped Jesus' face with this rag, and miraculously his face transferred onto the rag like it was silly putty on the funny papers. Now as an outsider, I thought this is what the Shroud of Turin was. That was the wrapping used to wrap Jesus after his death, so the thing I'm learning is that Jesus left an imprint of his face on just about any surface he touched. You'd give him a hug, have his face on the shoulder of your shirt for the rest of your life as a sacred artifact. Now, the Veil of Veronica is hard to nail down hard, concrete facts on. It's never been officially canonized as a relic of the church, and is only alleged to exist. It's claimed to be owned at St. Peter's in Rome, although this particular relic is not on public display anywhere. Probably for the best. Honestly don't know if I want to see a 2,000-year-old sweat stain. The ones underneath my shirts are bad enough. Now it might sound like I'm being disparaging, referring to this relic multiple times as a sweat rag or a sweat stain, but I would like to offer this. The Latin name for the veil is sudarium. Sudarium literally translates to sweat cloth, so even the official churchly terminology for this relic acknowledges that it's just a stinky rag that has some sweat on it, but a holy stinky rag that has some sweat on it. Number 3. Hyacinth of Caesarea. Our next entry is the bones of Hyacinth of Caesarea, another Catholic mummy. I'm starting to think there's more Catholic mummies than there were Egyptian ones. Incredibly ornate and gorgeous, the bones of Hyacinth look like something out of one of the Indiana Jones sequels rather than like a real thing you can go and see, but I promise you they are totally extant. On the grounds of the Fürstenfeld Abbey reside the relics of 2 saints. Now, these aren't just like a toenail or a tongue, and more on that later, but these are full-on science class skeletons dressed to the 9 in gold and jewels, encrusted in more diamonds and rubies than you could imagine. They are probably worth more than your and my apartments combined. Old Hyacinth, Hisey, as he liked to be called by his friends, was an obscure martyr from the early days of Christianity, slain by the Romans for his faith. We know precious little about him today, but we know that his name appears in a list of martyrs from the 4th century, which suggests that he used to be pretty important, and he was popular enough to write his name down on a list, much like what I'm doing right now. Look at how history repeats itself like that. Isn't that fascinating? Now, Hyacinth's skeleton showed up at the Church of the Assumption in, I'm going to excuse the pronunciation here, Fürstenfeldbruck near Munich at an unknown date. Did somebody just drop him off? Somebody just dumped a bag of bones on the front step like he's a baby you're giving up for adoption at the fire station? No more questions. The church was sacked by the Swedish army in the 17th century, and when it was rebuilt, they really went all out with the decor, going over the top a little baroque, including a skeleton decked out in bling, looking like he is about to take over the skeleton rap scene. So that's Hyacinth, largely not remembered in life for any particular reason beyond being slain for his religion, and remembered forever as a ludicrously swagged out skeleton. We can all only hope for similar legacies as dear sweet Hyacinth. Number 2, the tongue of Saint Padilla. Did you know your tongue is made up of 8 muscles? Maybe you didn't. Did you know that one of the most important relics to the Catholic Church is a dried up 8,000-year-old tongue that looks like beef jerky kept inside a golden helmet that looks like something out of a dark fantasy 80s movie? Well, now you do. And have you enjoyed how much of this list is mummified bodies in gold? Because I have. St. Anthony was said to be a jewel case of the Bible, making a name for himself with his apparently extremely inspirational sermons that won the Catholic Church many new members. People would flock in just to hear what St. Anthony was talking about. Apparently, he even got a bunch of ex-Christians to reform and rejoin the faith. He was apparently an incredibly accomplished public speaker, and I would say that he had a silver tongue, but we actually have proof of what color his tongue was because it's kept in a little glass jar. St. Anthony would pass away in 1231 from edema, a horrible disease that causes a buildup and blockage of fluid in the body's tissues. Now, some 30 years later, in 1263, he was exhumed, and shocking the gravediggers who were doing it, While his body had rotted and decomposed, his legendary tongue was still intact, as incorruptible as it had been in life, allegedly still wet with saliva. I wonder if he could still taste. Seeing it was a miracle, the gravediggers took his tongue alongside the bottom half of his jaw, and they are both displayed in the Basilica of St. Anthony of Padua in elaborate gold reliquaries. But honestly, it looks like something straight out of Warhammer 40k. Does no one think this is as odd as I do? Maybe I'm an outsider. I didn't grow up terribly Catholic, so I don't really know these imagery. I know the story behind it isn't terribly scary, but the image of this tongue and jaw inside a little glass helmet wrapped in gold looks like something I would ask an AI to make if I typed in nightmare. A tongue shouldn't look like that. And I feel like a jaw shouldn't look like that either. Am I alone in this? Am I weird for thinking this is weird? You let me know down below in the comments if maybe I just lack context on all of this. And number 1, Camillus de Lellis' heart. Camillus de Lellis was a man with a big heart full of love, never ending in generosity. We know just how big his heart is because it is kept in a glass jar and it is salted to preserve its legacy. Camillus started out pretty humble, born in 16th century Naples. He would later become a soldier until a brutal gambling problem would end up overtaking his life, leaving him in rags driving a donkey cart, but he knew that a far better life was out there. Eventually, he was urged by a friar to explore the lighter side of his soul, and eventually someone was able to pierce his heart both figuratively and later literally, and persuaded him into seeking divine retribution. Camillus would devote his life to providing for the ailing, but tragically, and perhaps unsurprisingly if you spent all your time around sick people before modern medicine, a lifetime of caring for the sick led to him also becoming gravely ill, soaking up a litany of ailments, including a sore in his leg for 46 years, a rupture for 38 years, 2 callous sores in the sole of a foot, violent nephritic colics, intense kidney pain, and for a long time a loss of appetite. Now all of these things, working in tandem, would eventually claim Camillus, a man who gave his life to healing the sick. So post-mortem he was canonized and thought of as the patron saint of the sick. And what better way, I ask, to venerate a man famous for his ever-giving heart than to cut his heart out like he was in the Temple of Doom and start salting his heart like it was beef jerky. You can go to St. Mary Magdalene's church in Rome to go see if his heart, put a stethoscope up to it, check if it's still beating, but it's pretty dried up and tucked away behind glass where you can go and pay your respects and see if it has any life left to bestow and maybe if it'll help you out with an illness at all. Number 5, the Busby stoop chair. When you think of a haunted object, I don't think your mind tends to go to a regular old armchair. Maybe dolls, gems, paintings, not to spoil the rest of the list, but I don't tend to think of home furnishings as being particularly cursed. Well then I guess it's because you haven't heard of the Busby stoop chair, that holds the bold distinction of being London's most haunted chair. Isn't that something to put on a resume? Thomas Busby was a common crook in the 17th century. He ran a counterfeit money operation with his father-in-law, but he was also known to be a general hoodlum, thief, brawler, and the kind of guy that would have rubbed elbows with Tom Shelby. It's said that a violent altercation with his father-in-law over a disagreement about their criminal enterprises led to Busby's associate dying by his hands. Busby was to be sent to the gallows, but had requested to visit his favorite pub one last time for a meal. He sat himself down in his favorite chair, ate his dinner, and claimed that if anyone ever sat in his chair after his death, he would make sure to haunt them. He would be hanged the next day. It would seem that his claim would prove to be true, because in the years since Busby's passing, the chair did bring mysterious misfortune. The first striking occurred in 1894, when a chimney sweep sat in the chair with a friend one evening and heard the story of the Busby haunting. He thought nothing of it, and after leaving the bar, passed out in the street. The next morning, he was found hanging from the gallows. During the Second World War, airmen used the pub as a hotspot, and the rumors began to sprout again about the Busby chair being haunted. An urban legend of an airman who sat in it and crashed his plane the next day was whispered in the wind amongst men. The owner of the pub, worried about the evil contained within a chair, rightfully so, eventually donated it to the Thirsk Museum in the UK, where it's hung 5 feet off the floor from the ceiling, just to ensure no one ever makes the mistake of trying to get too comfy in that cursed chair. And my ghouls and my goblins, if you'd like to hear more scary stuff, you don't have to go anywhere at all. Click through for hundreds of videos about cursed objects, aliens, cryptids, creatures, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, and way more. Stay subscribed and creep on creeping on. Number 4. Robert the Doll. Now, every good list of cursed objects should definitely include at least one cursed doll, I think, just for good measure. It's called Annabelle's claws. Dolls are just inherently a little bit scary when they're not being used for make-believe or having tea parties, and they're especially scary when they carry a series of unfortunate urban legends with them, like the case of one Robert the Doll. Maybe you've even heard of Robert the Doll, as he's actually pretty famous as far as cursed dolls go out there. It's kind of Annabelle, Robert, the rest of them. Robert's been haunting for over a century. He used to be the property of one Robert Jean Otto. Now, although he shared a name with the doll, he preferred to be called Otto, maybe because the doll took it. Otto received Robert as a young boy from his grandfather, who obtained it through unknown means, as trying to trace it has been fruitless. No toy company has ever been found to have produced it. Otto loved Robert and had an active imagination to a degree that unsettled his parents. He would refer to the doll in first person and brought it everywhere with him, even dressed it in his clothing. That's kind of odd, but it's still little kid behavior. Otto would say he could hear Robert talk to him and would see him move. And children who passed the Otto estate when walking by would claim they saw Robert in the windows, watching them from up high, appearing and disappearing. Otto would blame all mishaps on Robert. Injuries, breaks around the house, accidents, anything that happened, it was because either Robert had told him to do it or Robert had done it. Kind of understandably, this behavior deeply worried Otto's parents. Otto kept Robert up until the day of his death in 1974, where he then traveled from home to home and collector to collector, causing a path of misfortune everywhere he went, until eventually getting himself incarcerated in the Key West Art and Historical Society, where he's now kept under a very tight lock and key and has become the museum's most popular attraction. Visitors even leave him offerings, little goodie bags, and even write letters asking for protection from him or a little aid cursing others. Employees of the museum say that sometimes they feel uncomfortable around him, and have noticed the chill in the air by his exhibit or electrical malfunctions near where he sits. It's been said that they need to stay on his good side lest they provoke his wrath. So I just want to throw this out there, Robert. I've always been a huge fan of all that you do, and that little sailor outfit is just chef's kiss. That looks great. Great on you. Matches your hair. Number 3, the Crying Boy. I love a good haunted painting. Maybe it was just because I had an odd fondness for Ghostbusters 2 as a kid, and a haunted painting centered pretty prominently in that. Maybe it's just because I'm enticed by the uncanny valley. I love a pair of eyes that you can look at but can never look at you back. Case in point, take a look at this painting, The Crying Boy. Looks like a fairly innocuous painting, right? Wouldn't look too out of place in your dentist's office. It's not really my scene, but I'm sure a generation of grannies have loved to put this above the fireplace. It's also been the center of a series of strange coincidences that are just too odd to be true. It was painted by an Italian painter, one Giovanni Bergolin, and mass-produced as a print across the 1950s, so everyone could enjoy hanging this sad crying boy in the comfort of their own home. Wow, that sentence out of context is crazy. Now, they would enjoy this painting in the comfort of their home until it would burn down, because for some bizarre otherworldly reason, firefighters around Essex, London would report that frequently, amidst smoldering ruins of a burned down house, repeatedly they would find the Crying Boy print completely untouched by the flames, even when everything else had burned to ash. Now, once is bizarre. 2 times, that's pretty strange. But this happens 3 times, pick up the phone and call the Ghostbusters, because you've got an outright paranormal mystery on your hands. The British tabloid The Sun loved the story and was spreading stories of the cursed paintings like a house on fire. Ooh, too soon? The Sun printed out warnings of people who owned the painting, telling them that they should get rid of it lest they start to find themselves smelling smoke. The story was so popular and people were so invested in the curse of the Crying Boy that the Sun tried to take it upon themselves to rid London of the curse by holding a bonfire in which anyone who owned a print of the cursed painting could come, torch it, and hopefully exorcise whatever demons got into the printing press. The bonfire was a raging success, with sackfuls of the prints being torched, seemingly ending the curse of the Crying Boy. Does anyone else kind of want one of the prints though? I don't know, I think there's something about it. I think it would tie the living room together. Number 2, the Santa Maria della Concezione crypts. Whew, my Italian is not as good as it should be. Inside the Santa Maria della Concezione crypts, as many as 4,000 friars lie here. Well, lie is probably the wrong word, as they hang here is probably a more accurate description, as these 4,000 bodies are hanging from the rafters, decorating the space of every inch of the church. Now, it might seem a bit grim or beautiful, depending on your twisted point of view. We're a scary channel, I ain't gonna judge you. There's a certain chic to it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have to spend a few $100 a month on keeping air fresheners and incense just running all the time there. Now, you might reasonably be wondering, Hey, why do they hang bones from the wall like they're throwing a Halloween party and no one went to the store to get actual decorations and they had to make do with what they had? Well, they're not just festive. The practice dates back from the 16th century when the Capuchin friars, not named after the monkey but because of the hoods they wore, left the friary of St. Bonaventure to come live at Santa Maria della Concezione. They were ordered by the Pope's brother at the time to bring the remains of deceased friars with them to their new home so that all the Capuchins could lie together. With a huge amount of bodies on their hands, the brothers decided to get a little fun with it and decorate the walls of the crypts with their bones as a way of reminding them that death comes for all of them. Surely there's a slightly easier way to remind you of the ever-present mortality that hangs over us than literally hanging a bunch of pelvises to the buttresses, but what do I know? A plaque in the crypt reads, "What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you shall be." Which is grim. No way around it. The crypt contains a little bit of everything inside you. Crypt of skulls, lovely load of leg bones, and the star of the show is definitely the crypt of pelvises. Oh, make sure you get a photo in there. Make sure you grab a fridge magnet from the Pelvis Room gift shop. And number 1, St. John the Baptist's many heads. They say 2 heads are better than 1, which might be proof of what a great man St. John the Baptist is, because no one can seem to agree how many heads the guy actually had. The saint's head was supposedly brought back from Constantinople in 1206 by the crusader Wallen de Satan, but it seems this happened more than a few times, since 3 different shrines across the globe all claim to have the original head of St. John the Baptist, and no one's able to clear this up anytime soon. St. John was a forerunner of Jesus Christ, and the New Testament says that John was beheaded by Herod around 28 CE as a punishment for criticizing his recent divorce. Yeesh. Paintings of the beheading depicted on a silver platter, which is a nice way to get a severed head, I think. I don't know if I ever want a head delivered to me, but if I had to, I would want it on a silver platter. According to the legend, there really was a silver platter his head was delivered on that made its way to Constantinople or Istanbul, but was sold by the Crusaders in order to pay for his travels back. John's head was on display in the Amiens Cathedral up until the French Revolution, where they confiscated all church treasures, and it would eventually return home in 1816, then going all the way back to Rome from Greek monks who brought it to a shrine decorated with beautiful stained glass, one panel depicting the head on a silver platter. You think you wouldn't want to remember that? Well, here's where the trouble comes in. A German museum in Munich also takes great pride in having St. John's head. The Munich Residence Museum contains a bunch of other holy relics, but their most prized is the alleged St. John's head, although no one really knows how it got there. This skull is wrapped in cloth and heavily interred with gems. Now 2 would be impressive, but St. John's got a crowd worth of heads because he's got 3. His last head can be found in Damascus, Syria in the Umayyad Mosque, one of the oldest and largest mosques in the world. This relic, also not exposed, wrapped in a cloth, and is currently located in a shrine dedicated to the saint. So will the real John the Baptist please stand up? Or do all 3 of these heads actually really belong to him, and he had to be beheaded 3 times for it to take? You know what, don't answer that. I'm not sure if that's something I really want to know.
Number 5 on this list is King Tut's mask. The curse of King Tut is one of the most famous curses to surround a tomb ever. King Tut was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who boasted one of the most ornate tombs in history. This tomb carried a curse though, and those who entered it suffered fatal consequences. On the pyramids of Giza, there's a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land." This curse stuck with those who entered. It all started with Howard Carter, the leader of the team, whose canary was eaten by a cobra the second that they first entered the tomb. Then the person who financed the whole excavation died shortly afterwards. And from there, a domino effect occurred where many others involved suffered horrible tragedies or passed away. Some speculate though that it wasn't actually the act of opening the tomb that sparked this curse, but it was what they did with King Tut's mask. King Tut had a burial mask on when he was mummified and put in his tomb. The mask is beautiful. It's meant to resemble the person it's on so that the gods can recognize him and bring him up to heaven. Inside the mask is a bunch of oils and materials that are said to help preserve the body. All of this is all well and good, but on the back of the mask is an inscription. This inscription is said to be a curse similar to the one on the pyramids of Giza. Well, if that wasn't enough, Then there's a rumor this mask was broken during the excavation process and had to be reassembled when they took it back to their headquarters. Opening the tomb is already problematic, but to then break the mask of King Tut that has a curse inscribed on it, that's just asking for trouble. Number 4 on this list is King Casimir IV's coffin. King Casimir was born in 1427 into royalty. By 1440, when he would have only been 13, Casimir was named the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and only 7 years later in 1447 became the fully fledged King of Poland. He stood as the King of Poland right up until the day he died. Oftentimes, kings don't make it right up until their death, but King Casimir's success was pretty historic. He's known in Polish history as being one of the most politically active and prosperous kings to ever rule over their country. During his reign, he won several wars, recovered territories for Poland, and made their royal family one of the leaders in Europe. Due to all of the glory that he received in his life, it was only fitting that he have a tomb that reflected this. He died when he was 65 years old in 1492 and was put to rest in the chapel of Wawel Castle. There he lay for roughly 500 years until 1973. Researchers opened the tomb to find a horrible surprise. The researchers opened this tomb and investigated the mummification process and all the artifacts he was buried with. They took his body and coffin out of this place and brought it back to their lab. What they didn't realize though was that this coffin had a curse to it. It's estimated that over 15 people died who worked on researching this body and this coffin. It took a while before they realized what was causing this death, but eventually they discovered the error of their ways. You see, the coffin was cursed, but it wasn't cursed with anything ghostly, it was cursed with Aspergillus flavus. Cursed is also a misleading word to use in this instance as well, because Aspergillus flavus is actually a pathogenic fungus. A fungus that when exposed to people can become a killer. For a long time, people thought that there truly was an ancient curse surrounding this coffin, but it was actually this fungus that kept preying on people's immune systems. Eventually, King Casimir's body was taken and put back into his tomb, but not before the damage had been done and over 15 people had lost their lives. Number 3 on this list is the Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. The Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall wasn't necessarily from a tomb, but it was recovered from a grave, so I think it still counts in this criteria. Burton Agnes Hall was built in the 17th century in Yorkshire. It was built by Sir Henry Griffith, who had 3 daughters he loved very much. They all moved there and were very happy for a time. One of the daughters was named Anne, and Anne loved to explore the outdoors. One day though, when she was exploring, a gang of robbers got to her and they beat her and left her for dead. When the family found her, there was barely any life left in her. They brought her back to their home, but her time on this world wasn't long. While she was dying, she had a very strange request to her 2 remaining sisters. She begged them to take her head and put it within the walls of the hall so that she could always be there with her family. She was dying, so they agreed, but neither of them actually intended on taking their sister's head off and keeping it in their home. A few days later, she died, and they buried her outside the hall without keeping their promise. This was a big mistake though. After she was buried, strange noises and banging sounds started happening all over the hall. Screams and crying could be heard throughout, and moans the family couldn't ignore. Eventually they gave in, dug Anne up, and took off her head. They brought it into the hall and the disturbances, they stopped. But years passed and the ownership of this hall changed. The new owners, they had no interest in a dead girl's skull in their home and got rid of it, but sure enough, just when they did, the noises and the hauntings started again. Over the centuries, people have tried and tried again to rid themselves of this skull many times, but eventually they always cave and they have to bring it back in. The skull truly is cursed, and it must remain inside the home at all times if you ever want any peace from Anne's spirit.
Number 3, killing Joan of Arc over pants. Joan of Arc is a very familiar name to Catholics and, well, just about everybody. She's a pretty famous historical figure. You probably know her famously as a saint. You might recognize her as a force for feminism. I think she was in one of the Bill and Ted movies. Well, her status as a saint came a long time after some trouble she was embroiled in with the church, who at one time saw her as an enemy to their very ideals, going so far as to consider her their #1 enemy. In 1429, the young Joan of Arc believed that God had spoken out to her and helped instigate an uprising to get the English out of France. Very cool for the French people who wanted them gone, but some high-ranking influential members of the clergy who had ties to the English weren't terribly fond of this wild woman who was going around dressing like a man and claiming that God spoke to her and was kicking all of their friends out of the country. Somebody do something about this wild woman. When King Charles VII enjoyed Joan's help during the many battles against the English, when Joan was captured by English forces, she learned the true extent of his loyalty when he handed her over to the Catholic Church to stand trial for heresy. After all, she was claiming she talked to God, and only the Pope is supposed to do that. And worst of all, Joan of Arc was wearing pants. She was wearing pants while doing it like a man. So Joan was put on trial for heresy and denied counsel, which is against her rights. Saul Goodman would have been furious. Regardless, Joan kept her cool, rather famously, and is famed for her level head. Joan was found guilty of being a rebellious spirit who wore men's clothes, and for these indignations was burned alive at the stake in front of a cheering crowd. In 1456, some 25 years after her horrific death, King Charles VII felt kind of bad about that whole ordeal, ordered an investigation, and made her a martyr. It wasn't until 1920 that she was officially canonized as a saint. Think of it like a heavenly apology. I'm sure the water's fine, I'm sure the air is cool, no bad blood between Joan and the Catholic Church. I bet she's having a great time. I'm sure she appreciated it. Number 2, buying redemption. Can man find redemption? Can the weight of our sins be undone? Can a person truly change his course? Can an evil man become good? These lofty questions have dominated the hearts of man for years, inspiring countless great works of art and philosophical conundrum. At religion's heart is the concept of salvation and redemption, so it might strike you as more than a little bit bizarre that at one point in time, the Catholic Church was selling absolution for a price tag. Now, before we get into that, we need to talk quickly about an indulgence. No, not eating an extra large cheese pizza by yourself, but that is an indulgence of sorts. If you're like me and you've skipped Sunday Mass for the last 26 years, basically an indulgence in Catholic terms is sort of like a plan or a plea for absolving your sins. Something you have to do to absolve yourself. 30 Hail Marys, confession, that sort of stuff. In the early 15th century, after Pope Julius died, Pope Leo X would inherit the papacy. Leo loved the pleasures that came with being Pope. He loved the big hat. He loved spending lavishly. He loved voluptuous entertainment. He loved living like a king, not a pope. It took him 8 years to completely drain the Vatican's treasury, which other popes weren't really doing. So when St. Peter's Basilica was in the process of being rebuilt, they were plain out of money and needed a fundraiser. But instead of selling Girl Guide cookies door to door, Leo announced that anyone who contributed money to the church would be granted an indulgence. Now, an indulgence was supposed to be a path laid out by a church for your betterment, but it was hawked as if you were buying a sin redemption ticket, like a get out of hell free card. Dominican friar John Testel was named the Grand Commissioner of Indulgences in Germany. Overseeing indulgences was his only job. That's the only thing this guy did to give you a sense of how many people were doing this. He sold absolution for future sins you were planning to commit later. Pay a small fee, and if you kill a guy next week, totally fine. God says it's okay. Now, this probably worked pretty decent if you had a bit of coin, but if you were an average person, a serf like me, perhaps, you did your best to prepare for an eternity in hell. Salvation was just another pleasure the rich had, and hell is where us poors go. Unsurprisingly, someone got very upset about this new stance from the church. He was pretty upset about this. His name was Martin Luther, and he passive-aggressively left a note on some doors like an upset roommate, and I can't remember if anything ever came out of that, if anything ever happened to him in history. It's lost to time. It's probably unimportant. Number 1, the plot of Assassin's Creed 2 was real. If you've garnered anything from this video, I sincerely hope it's that the Pope oftentimes does not follow the rules. Yes, the guy interprets the will of God, and he's got a direct phone line to him directly, but that doesn't mean he has to follow every single one of his rules. We've already discussed some truly wild sins: horse mating, chestnut parties, spending money, but let's top it all off with the biggest one: a full-blown assassination conspiracy revolving around a pope ordering a hitman. And you just sit on that for a second. In the 1470s, Pope Sixtus IV hatched a scheme to rid Florence of the Medicis, who was the most influential family in the country at the time, with such power that they rivaled the church. The Medicis had served as the bankers for the papacy for generations, and as such were absurdly wealthy. Pope Sixtus kickstarted this conflict when he swapped the Medicis as the papal bankers to the Pazzi family. Oh, no. The Medicis didn't want to fund the Pope's claim of the town of Imola, which the Medicis wanted to claim for themselves to lord over. So, something had to be done about these meddling Medicis. Pope Sixtus contracted 2 assassins to carry out the plot against Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici during Easter Mass on a Sunday, which just feels unbelievably disrespectful to me. If you're the Pope, I mean, ordering an assassin against anybody, morally gray, but doing it on Easter Mass? You're not even allowed to talk in church, but you can orchestrate a political assassin? I don't know. Now, if you're sitting listening to this and you're kind of wondering why some of this sounds vaguely familiar and you don't know why you recognize these names, it's because you might recognize this plotline in between jumping into bales of hay as being a major force in Assassin's Creed 2, where protagonist Ezio Auditore da Firenze ends up helping out Lorenzo Medici a great deal. Yes! The games were really inspired by true history, save for a few extendo blades and boss fights against the Pope. Rodrigo Borgia, as far as we know, never got into a fistfight with any assassins and wasn't killed by Cesare, but I digress. If you remember from Assassin's Creed 2, Giuliano was fatally slain, but Lorenzo survived and rallied support of Florence in a war against the church. Ezio picked off conspirators, and then sailed to Naples to meet King Ferdinand to discuss a peaceful solution to the bubbling war. So in the end, the plot failed drastically because all it really did was make people think that Lorenzo Medici was the coolest guy around and brought intense shame to Pope Sixtus, and it inspired one of the best games Ubisoft ever made. Number 5, St. Clair's fingernails and her hair. Now, some people say that fingernails and hair continue to grow after the body passes away. This is commonly repeated, but actually not true, because rather it's the skin around the fingernails retracting that gives the illusion that the fingernails are still growing. I thought I would just toss in a totally unrelated fun fact you can use at a party. These fingernails aren't growing at all, because they're not attached to anybody, and they're kept in a glass box alongside some of St. Clair's wonderful curls, like the world's worst and possibly stinkiest time capsule. Now, St. Clair was often overshadowed by her more famous mentor, Francis of Assisi, but St. Clair was her own woman, accomplished in her own right. She founded her own order of nuns, the Poor Clares. Inspired by Francis's teachings when she was a teenager, she renounced the world and founded an order based on the ideals of extreme poverty and contemplation. I should probably look into this order because being extremely broke and contemplating being extremely broke is about 99% of what I do. The order spread popularity and houses of Poor Clares were established far away from her home convent in Assisi. Now, it's said that part of what made St. Clair's decision to give up the worldly life so inspiring was that not only was she blessed to be born into a family of great wealth, but oh va-va-voom, St. Clair was a real stunner. Now, you know, the depictions we have to work with may not look like much, but they called her the first Jenner for her luscious lips and flowing locks. As proof of her devotion, Francis trimmed her beautiful, extravagant hair as a physical manifestation of rejecting her former vain existence. As you can see, I'm not quite there yet. I'm still quite happy with my vain, disgusting hair. Now, someone down the line managed to get a hold of St. Clair's hair and fingernails. Maybe they were just sweeping the barber room floor. These treasures, for lack of a better word, were kept and encased in a reliquary at the basilica named in her honor. This also contains a rock crystal flask with her fingernails. Really not sure why anyone felt they needed to keep that. I'm not sure how holy these are, but hey, I'm not a saint or a bishop or a pope or any of that stuff. I'm just a YouTuber and I'm barely that even. But if you want to hear more of me narrating some of these strange and peculiar parts of the big globe we share, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. We got a little something for everyone. So make sure you click on through, like this video, subscribe, and hit that little bell, and we can keep on bringing you screams every single day, twice a day, and then some. But do that at the end of this video, okay? We got way more weird Catholic relics coming up for you. Number 4, papal hearts. You know, they say some people wear their hearts on their sleeves, and some people collect 22 hearts in marble urns inside a beautiful reliquary. We all have our hobbies. We all collect things. Just make sure those hearts are still in their original packaging, otherwise, you know, they're totally worthless. Well, these aren't just regular old hearts. These are the hearts of 22 former popes. Obviously they're former popes if their hearts are, obviously. At the Church of Santi Vincenzo e Anastasio a Trivia. Oof, that's a mouthful, we're not saying that again. You can find the sealed hearts of 22 popes in marble urns for all to appreciate. The popes are listed to the left of the altar, with the oldest coming in all the way from the 15th century with Sixtus V to the fresh and still beating heart of Leo XIII in 1903. Now this custom of separating a pope's organs from the corpse sounds a bit strange, or a bit Egyptian, like they might mummify them. And then this process was called praecordia, and was done to prevent decay while funeral arrangements were made, and just to test a little bit if they were worried the Pope was going to reanimate. The tradition started up in the 14th century when it was established that when a Pope passed away, they would be mourned for 9 days. 9 days, with suffrage massages being said each day. They borrowed this little schedule from the Byzantines, who observed deaths of their emperors in a very similar manner, really taking a while off. They took a whole pay period to mourn the loss, and then you dry those tears right up, get back to work. Now, this was all the rage for popes of yesteryear, very trendy, very in fashion. But Pope Pius X in 1914 had a change of heart when he expressly forbade it in his burial and will. He said, "Don't do any of that weird stuff to me." Those were his exact words, if you can believe it. Now since then, his successors have all agreed and have all done the same. But who's to say? I feel this could be coming back in fashion. Pope Francis, how you feeling? You gotta listen to your heart on this one. Number 3, the holy souls of purgatory. Purgatory, in Catholic belief, is kind of like a giant waiting room while the upper management figures out just where exactly they're going to find a good spot that's best for you. Well, that's simplifying it a bit, obviously. The soul is thought to be stranded in purgatory until it atones for its earthly sins, but you can hurry the process up just a little bit if your loved ones back on earth are praying for you. In the back of the Chiesa del Sacro Cuore del Suffragio del Piccolo Museo del Purgatorio, or Museum of the Holy Souls in Purgatory, holds a collection of relics that have been singed by the hands of the souls of those trapped in purgatory. These burned handprints are believed to be the souls trying to communicate that their loved ones need to pray harder. I don't know about you, but I would definitely start praying real hard if burned handprints started showing up in my books, but I would be praying for an exorcist, more likely. Now, this is kind of interesting, and I didn't even know this. Purgatory isn't even mentioned directly in the Bible, but the concept of purgatory dates back to the 11th century. This notion that trapped souls needed to be freed came from a story told to the Abbot Odilo of Cluny by a monk returning from the Holy Land. He told this story about how this ship had been wrecked, that he'd been cast ashore on a mysterious island, and a hermit who lived on the island related his own story of a chasm from which screams of trapped souls and demonic flames rose and ravaged. He told of how the demons would complain about losing souls when your loved ones would pray for their behalf. So November 2nd was established as All Souls Day. Everybody, all the souls. Where it was believed that prayers by the living could help get all of those trapped dead in purgatory loose. You know, it's kind of like that one episode of The Simpsons where the town comes together to get Bart out of the well. It's a similar enough concept, you know. They sang a song, you pray, souls get out, Bart gets out, pretty much one and the same. This particular collection of burned relics in particular, though, was collected when Victor Jouet, the missionary behind the collection, experienced a fire that burned part of the original suffragio, leaving behind a scorched image of a face that he believed was a trapped soul. Now, again, just me personally, but if I saw a face burned into one of my possessions, I would move entirely, call an exorcist, be putting salt circles around my feet for the rest of my life, but I appreciate what he did too. Number 5, a close personal working relationship with Benito Mussolini. The Vatican isn't just the seat of the Catholic Church, it's also the smallest country in the world. Did you know that? Despite existing inside of Italy, the Vatican isn't part of Italy, but rather its own country, a little sovereign state. About 1,000 people live there total. But it hasn't always been that way though. It wasn't founded as its own separate city. And the reason it became that way is a little darker than I'm sure the church would like to admit to: a treaty with infamous fascist leader Benito Mussolini. In 1922, Mussolini and the National Fascist Party came to power, crushing democracy and putting up a pretty hostile dictatorship in its place. In 1929, Mussolini and the church came together to meet and sign a treaty, granting the church the status as a private enclave, a sovereign state inside of Italy. The deal was, Mussolini wouldn't bother the Vatican, and they wouldn't bother him. Mussolini even paid out a massive settlement, which the church invested and is believed to have been valued at $780 million, alongside the church getting tax exemption status and priests getting a healthy salary from the Italian government. All of those benefits you can thank fascist leader Benito Mussolini for. Perhaps most illuminating, however, was a clause that protected the Vatican's dignity, so to speak, meaning as part of their laws as a sovereign state, they were allowed to arrest and try anyone who criticized the people and the church. In exchange for signing this treaty, the Catholic Church publicly supported the fascist dictatorship and was recognized as Italy's official government. The Vatican's own newspaper printed shortly after the deal went down, "Italy has been given back to God, and God to Italy." And they had the support of someone who was involved in hundreds of thousands of deaths to thank. Isn't that fun? And if you're looking for way more church conspiracies, old secrets, relics, all kinds of things, ghouls, goblins, aliens galore, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. Really, we'll do just about anything on this channel. I'm talking about the church right now. So hit subscribe, make sure you ring that little bell as well so you don't miss a single scream, but you do that at the end of this video, okay? Because I got 4 more church scandals coming up for you right now. Number 4, the Banquet of Chestnuts. Believe it or not, this might shock you, more than a few popes have been less than pious. You know, we'll go deeper later in the list, but several popes would be on the naughty list. Among them, Alexander VI, who you might know better as Rodrigo Borgia. Rodrigo was said to have some pretty bizarre hobbies, even by papal standards. He apparently loved to watch horses mate. That was apparently one of his favorite ways to spend an afternoon. Once or twice, sure, you know, we all get curious, Rodrigo, but frequently, I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe you have to be there. Anyway, that's not even the most controversial thing the Borgias were involved in. Seriously, look up the Borgias after this video, there was a lot. One of the most infamous things Rodrigo got involved in was called the Banquet of Chestnuts, sometimes referred to a little more colloquially as the Joust of... I don't really think I can say this and stay in the family-friendly guidelines. The Joust of Women of the Night, if you know what I mean. Are you following? It's a word that they say in Game of Thrones a lot. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, maybe you're not old enough to be watching this channel. The joust that shall not be named wasn't quite a literal joust, although there was a great deal of thrusting and charging. Excuse me. Cesare Borgia, real-life Jaime Lannister and one-time Assassin's Creed Brotherhood villain, arranged a banquet in his chambers in the Vatican with 50 of the hardest-working courtesans of the time. They danced after dinner, then disrobed, and then the joust began. Rodrigo and his family gleefully threw chestnuts on the floor, forcing the women to grovel around their feet like swine. They offered prizes, clothes, jewelry, all sorts of baubles for the man who could fornicate with the most courtesans, that's pretty interesting. That's a pretty interesting event for the Pope to preside over. Think about the next time you're at an official church event in your community, like a bake sale or something. Just think about the other events the head of the Catholic Church and the voice that speaks to God was holding and participating in. Number 2, ballista balls. You know, the last couple years, I think, had all of us acting pretty strange. You know, maybe you got through it by binging all of Tiger King in a day. Maybe you got really into making a sourdough. Maybe you returned a cursed artifact you stole when you were a teenager. We all went through a strange period. In 2020, an anonymous source returned an ancient artifact that they'd stolen as a teenager to the Israeli government. A Bronze Age ballista ball fired during the Great Jewish Revolt by the Romans. The thief swiped them as a teenager when visiting with a group of friends, and had went on to live a fairly normal life. Had a nice career, found a partner, sired some children, but he had said that throughout his entire life, he felt as if there was a weight over him, as if he had some invisible presence crushing down on him. He said no matter how long it had been or how much his life had moved past this one act of delinquency, his heart could never move from it, and he felt as if he had been cursed to forever bear its guilt. During the event of the last few years, he said it stirred in him this apocalyptic feeling that made him feel like he had to return the ballista balls in hopes of finally clearing his consciousness. I hope he didn't think he did all that. Through Facebook, he ended up getting put towards the right channels to return it. But you know what's kind of bizarre? This isn't even the first time that someone's returned a pair of cursed ballista balls, because in 2015, an almost identical story played out. In 2015, 2 ballista balls were returned to the Israeli authorities anonymously alongside a note saying, "I took these in 1995 from a residential quarter at the foot of the summit. They have brought me nothing but trouble. Please do not steal antiquities." Well, I've got to say it's a nice change of pace to hear about people trying to undo the curse before things got too irrevocable. And a pretty simple, easy follow message for you kids at home. Don't steal antiquities. Unless you're Indiana Jones, that should be fairly easy for all of us to follow. And finally, number 1, the Black Prince's Ruby. The Black Prince's Ruby was once thought to be the biggest ruby in the world. Unfortunately though, upon closer inspection, this mighty ruby turned out to be an imposter. A spinel disguised as a ruby, a mineral known as the Great Imposter. Perhaps then that it's fitting that this accursed gemstone's legacy began with a story of deceit. Prior to being the crowning jewel in the imperial state crown of the UK, the Black Prince's Ruby first appeared in the 14th century, where it was owned by Abu Sa'id, who was the last Sultan of Granada. Little history lesson for you, so don't fall asleep too much. In the late 13th century, Granada was losing a war to King Pedro the Cruel, who historically was not known to be nice, you know, given the title. The Christian kingdom of Castilla was taking more and more of Said's territory, and so to arrange a peaceful end to the war, the Sultan had requested an audience with King Pedro in Castilla and arranged a meeting, and they came to an agreement and the Sultan was welcomed. When the Sultan and his arriving party thought they were welcomed as guests, they were surprised to see King Pedro welcome them with drawn swords. He was King Pedro the Cruel, after all. I don't need to tell you what happened next, but King Pedro stripped the jewel off of the Sultan's corpse. Soon after, King Pedro found himself in a new war against his brother Henry of Trastamara for Castilla's throne. King Pedro commissioned the Black Prince Edward of England for aid, and as payment for his services, gave him the ruby, where it would get its name, the Black Prince's Ruby. Edward would return home to England, but Pedro would fall in battle to his brother. Edward the Black Prince would die slowly and painfully from a disease before he could inherit the throne, giving the ruby to his son Richard II. Richard would become king, but he was taken out by Henry IV, who took the ruby as well, who then passed from a slow illness, giving the ruby to his son Henry V. This is the worst thing to re-gift possible. It would pass from a lineage of kings until eventually finding its way to the Tudors, and then eventually after that, finding a permanent home in the London Tower, amidst the crown jewel collection, where it's been sealed away, never to be claimed again, because just look at the history of this thing. This is not something you ever want to unwrap.